Hey, and welcome back to another video. This is the 14th episode of the narrative, which takes place 3 years after the war with the Akatsuki, and Naruto is ready to gain a surprising new colleague to finally take the Chunnin examinations. Please support by liking and subscribing. Let's start the show. Tsunade's face showed no expression on the outside, but smiled on the inside as she thought to herself. Well done, Kakashi, this should keep them bickering at each other for weeks. It should give me all the time I need to convince Naruto to reinforce the seal. Hamura broke the stunned silence first. What you have just proposed could easily be seen as an act of treason, Hatake Kakashi. He warned him. Kakashi tilted his head slightly and said, "The first, second, third and fourth Hokages would disagree. I didn't come here with this claim without doing my homework first. You really should read that scroll before throwing out threats like that. In it contains the way our first Hokage chose the second Hokage, and that way of choosing a Hokage persisted all the way up to the fourth Hokage. After the third Hokage died, this scroll was lost. It was only supposed to be passed on from one Hokage to the next. It was meant for their eyes only. Inside this scroll is the test one is to be put through to become Hokage as laid down by our forefathers." Choza grabbed the edge of the scroll and pulled it over to him and began reading it old text. Koharu looked at him stiffly and said, "Regardless of what is written on that scroll, Lady Tsunade was agreed on by the Lord of Fire and confirmed by both the village and the High Council as our Hokage. So your little play at grabbing the title of Hokage for yourself and stopping us from making a new Jinchuriki ends here." Kakashi raised an eyebrow at her curiously and said, "I did not come here to post my claim before the High Council, Elder Koharu. I came here to post my claim before the village council, which, by your own words, you do not get a vote on this claim or its outcome." Choza's eyes darted across faded scroll and then finally he set it down. He looked out over the table at everyone and said, "Kakashi isn't trying to make himself Hokage. According to this scroll, the rightful Hokage is none other than Naruto Uzumaki." The elders glared at him in anger as Choza said, "This scroll is a detailed account of just how Hashirama tested his little brother to become Hokage." Then the second Hokage added to the scroll and wrote down how he and his older brother tested Hiruzen Sarutobi to become Hokage. Sarutobi later added to it an even more detailed account of how he tested Lord Jiraiya and Minato with the exact same test. Jiraiya failed, but, as you all must be aware of, Minato succeeded in passing the test and became our greatest Hokage. The final part of the scroll is where Minato names Hatake Kakashi and his own son as his apprentices to take the test. Hamura crossed his arms and said, "And how are you so sure he has passed this test, Choza?" Choza smiled and said, "That part cannot be denied, as Lady Tsunade has already passed him herself when she named him the keeper of the Shadow Clone Jutsu. There is an exhausting list of qualities and requirements to even be considered to take the final test. Naruto passed them all." Hayashi asked, "And what per se is this final test?" Choza looked over at him and said, "The person taking the test must make at least 5 shadow clones and train with them for an entire day." Hayashi scratched his chin in thought before saying, "That is an interesting way to test for a Hokage. Only someone with chakra levels on par with a Hokage could hold a jutsu like that for an entire day. But why train with them?" He turned to Kakashi and asked, "Do you know why they would want their apprentices to train with shadow clones, Kakashi?" Kakashi slowly nodded his head before saying, "Yes, I do. It's the source of a Hokage's power and the secret of the Shadow Clone Jutsu. To figure out that secret is what the final test to become Hokage is all about. I will not tell you all of its secrets. There is a good reason that even in this scroll handed down only from one Hokage to the next that it is not written down. Even if I wanted to tell you, I couldn't, because Naruto is the keeper of the Shadow Clone Jutsu. I would need his permission, and I know he would never grant me that permission." Choza said, If what I've understood is correct, is it not possible that you might be the rightful Hokage, Hatake Kakashi?" Kakashi shook his head and said, "No, indeed I figured out the jutsu's secret before Naruto, but I lack the chakra to use it the way he and our former Hokages used it. I ultimately failed the test." The rightful Hokage by the old ways is Naruto. Hayashi leaned back in his chair and said, "It seems this whole claim against Lady Tsunade's right to be Hokage rests solely on whether it was legal for us and the Lord of Fire to appoint a new Hokage when the third died. Either way, Lady Tsunade is a Hokage, but the question is whether she is a full-fledged Hokage or a steward Hokage." Choza nodded at him and said, "This certainly is a matter of great importance. We should hear all the evidence and come to a conclusion on this matter." Koharu's eyes narrowed at Kakashi before saying, "You can bog this council meeting down all you like, Hatake Kakashi, but the order to reseal the fox is still in effect. If you think you have bought time for Naruto, then you are sadly mistaken. You have only locked yourself down in this debate while the sealers are gathered. I'm afraid you are wrong, Elder Koharu. Naruto as of right now is under the protection of the Umbu. You cannot touch him, or would you risk an open civil war?" Kakashi said seriously. "You have no right, Kakashi. We of the High Council are above you in rank and power. Under what grounds would you have precedence to disobey us?" Hamura said. Kakashi held up 2 fingers and said, "2 reasons. The first reason is that as the Lord Shadow of the Umbu I am swore to protect the Hokage with my life. Right now, who exactly is the rightful Hokage is in question. I cannot allow you to reseal the fox and leave Naruto to die if there is even the slightest chance he is our Hokage. The second is that if he is the true Hokage, then you too, as the High Council, lose all power, as he would have to select his own High Council. And I seriously doubt he would choose you two for the job." Koharu looked at him in outrage and said, "Hatake Kakashi, do you realize the grave situation the village is under right now? Should the beasts break free, our entire village could be destroyed again. Threaten us with civil war all you like, but we will do what we have to protect this village. If we must, we will answer for our action after the fact. The village must be preserved." Kakashi's eyes bored into the elders as he said, "You might want to watch what you say, Elder Koharu and Hamura. You don't have the numbers under your command that you think you do. Those in the Umbu follow my orders, and right now it is unsure of who the Hokage is, so as of right now I take orders from no one. Should you decide to try to take Naruto by force, you will find that he is very well guarded by ninja that would choose his life over Lady Tsunade's. He is inside the safest place in the village, his estate that still has active traps put up by the 4th Hokage. Should you actually breach those defenses, you will have 3 sages to deal with. Every one of them is willing to lay down their life to protect him. The first just got back from a mission this morning. I made sure to send him straight to Naruto's estate for extra protection. Konohamaru Sarutobi, grandson of the 3rd Hokage, a full-fledged monkey sage like his grandfather and trained by the great sage himself as his apprentice. From being in the same squad as Hiruzen for so many years, I'm sure you know what a monkey sage is capable of. Next, you will have Tsunade's own disciple to deal with, Sakura Haruno, a slug sage who uses the same monstrous strength and fighting style as Lady Tsunade. She is also the second best medic in the Land of Fire. Only Tsunade herself is greater. Lastly and most importantly, you will have to face his strongest protector, Hanabi Hyuga, the demon fist of the Hyuga clan, the disciple of the great sage. She is the youngest sage in the history of our village, and she is the youngest ever to master time/space ninjutsu. She wields our village's most famous sword, the 4th Hokage's Flight Thunder God, and she is an expert at using it with the Yellow Flash Jutsu. She also has her spirit marker kunais modeled after Minato's and knows how to use them. Her assassination abilities far outstrip even my own. She also is connected to Naruto to such a degree that she can tap into his near-limitless Churka pool. Oh, and something else I should mention, she now has my Chidori in her arsenal of weapons too. She could probably go toe-to-toe with Lady Tsunade in a fight and win if she was serious. But you must think I'm overplaying my hand," he stated with a casual shrug, and then reached into his pouch. He pulled out a fist-sized crystal ball and rolled it onto the table. It stopped in the center as he said, "This is a recording of their last mission together. Watch carefully what happens when you hurt one of Hanabi's teammates." The orb glowed to life as it projected a recording on the ceiling. The same 3 seconds played again and again. Konohamaru stabbed through the heart, and a split second later Hanabi disappeared and reappeared holding her sword in a reverse grip as the ninja's head violently flew into the air. Blood from the decapitating wound gushed into the air as the head landed nearly 20 feet away. The council members watched in blank horror. Even Hayashi Hyuga was stunned watching his daughter on the recording. Kakashi broke the long silence and said, "All your jutsu will become meaningless before Hanabi should you cross her. She is a pretty calm and collected person. That is unless you try to harm someone she cares about, then the demon is released and she will kill you without pause. I, however, have refrained from telling her just what you two on the High Council are up to. Not because I particularly like you, but because I could not guarantee your safety. Even Naruto himself can't hide from her, so you two would stand no chance before her," Kakashi said, and then looked up at the recording of Hanabi decapitating the ninja playing over and over on the ceiling. "You can imagine what she might do to you if she found out," he said, and many of the council members trembled at the sheer thought of crossing her. "So you are really set on this course of action, Hatake Kakashi?" Hamura asked while sweating nervously. Kakashi looked over to him and calmly said, "My hand is played. It is now you of the High Council to decide what to do. You can attack and start a civil war in the village, or you can let the village council decide this matter without bloodshed. It is your call, Elder Hamura and Elder Koharu." Koharu looked down her nose at him in disdain and said, "You seem quite confident, Kakashi, but when this is all over you will still stand trial as a traitor for these threats." "Threats? I have no need for them. You armed me with the greatest weapon you could by trying to throw Naruto's life away for your selfish desires. You have made many enemies from that one action. All I have to do is tell them your plan and the ninjas of the village will flock to protect their hero. You are at a stalemate and just don't want to admit it," Kakashi said. Tsunade sighed as she stood up. Her chair screeched on the wooden floor and she headed to the door. "Lady Tsunade, where do you think you are going?" Koharu scolded her. She turned her head over Hisha to look at them with a tired, annoyed look before saying, "Hokage, Steward Hokage, it makes no difference to me. I still have too much paperwork to do for me to be sitting around here listening to you all snap at each other. I'll be in my office should you all decide who is the rightful Hokage. Come let me know. Kami knows I'd love a vacation from the job." She left through the door with a hidden smile on her face. "You have far exceeded my expectation, Kakashi. They will probably be tied up for a month with this. Your skill at taking away their option of force was so bold that it even worked. You certainly are Minato's apprentice, that is for sure." 2 days later, Sakura walked into Naruto's room. Naruto was still resting as Hanabi was reading a scroll at Naruto's messy desk. Naruto's face was still pale and thin-looking. "Hanabi, it's time for dinner. You might want to hurry before Konohamaru scarfs it all down without you," Sakura said quietly. Hanabi slowly set her book down and turned to her. "It's been 3 days, Sakura. How much longer will he sleep?" she asked. Sakura gave her a weak smile and said, "I don't know for sure, but his vital signs are looking better every day. I'd have to guess that he will wake up within another day or so." Hanabi gave her a disappointed look like a child and said, "I hope it's sooner than that. It's so boring when he is out like this." Sakura sighed and said, "Yes, I guess it is, Hanabi." Sakura and Hanabi entered the dining room where Konohamaru was already stuffing his face. Shizen was giving him a disapproving because of his lack of manners. "Hello, Shizen and Konohamaru. How is the food today?" Sakura asked warmly as she took her seat. "It is pretty good, but Konohamaru wouldn't know that because he eating too fast to even taste it," she said while eyeing Konohamaru with disdain. Hanabi giggled slightly as she sat down and picked up her chopsticks. She took a few bites of food before asking Konohamaru, "How did your last mission go?" "Sorry, I forgot to ask when you came here 2 days ago." Konohamaru swallowed hard and said, "Phew, that was good. Oh, my mission? It was nothing special. We just guarded a shipment of goods to Otaka. It was completely boring." Hanabi smiled at him and then went back to her food. How is your training coming along? She asked. He rolled his eyes and sighed. It's not, I can't even practice it here because the area is too small. Man, why did Kakashi-sensei tell me I needed to wait here for a few days? He said bitterly as he crossed his arms. Sakura turned to him and said, You know very well why. There are rumors that someone might try to attack Naruto while he is resting. It is highly unlikely anyone could even get inside of here, but he is just being safe. Konohamaru mumbled to himself. Safe, she says, anyone that would try to attack Naruto has a death wish. This is absurd to interrupt my training for this. Hanabi, please make sure to eat your fill. You have been looking a little thin since you went out to train with Kakashi-sensei. Shizen told her. I will, Shizen. She replied respectfully. Konohamaru gave her a confused and curious look before asking. You went out to train with Kakashi-sensei? So, what did you learn? Hanabi blinked a few times at him and said, Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you. Kakashi taught me the lightning element while you were away. Konohamaru leaned in closer to her and overly casually asked. So, how far did you get into mastering it? She smiled as she bit her lips together shyly. I actually mastered the Chidori, she admitted. Konohamaru's jaw fell open as he stared at her in disbelief before mastering himself. No way. You couldn't have already. Aw man, now you have more elements than I do. It's just not fair. How am I getting so far behind you? He complained loudly as he crossed his arms with a pouting look on his face. Hanabi laughed softly at him and said, Well, lightning is my main element, Konohamaru. It's only natural that I would pick up on it quickly. That's it, he said as he pointed at her with intensity in his eyes. After dinner, let's have a sparring match. Sakura and Shizen both said at the same time. Absolutely not. Hanabi laughed so hard she nearly fell out of her chair. Konohamaru, we are still on a mission. You aren't allowed to waste chakra. Sakura scolded him. Konohamaru's eyes narrowed with a put-out look on his face as Hanabi struggled to control her laughing fit. Besides, Naruto wouldn't be happy if you trashed his estate, neither would I. I live here as well, Sakura said knowingly. They finished eating and Sakura collected the plates. I'm going to turn in early, everyone, Sakura said as she took the plate to the kitchen. Shizen yawned and said, I'm feeling kind of tired myself. I stayed up late last night. I too shall take an early leave to bed. I think I'll go back to reading my lightning element book before bed, Hanabi said before heading back to Naruto's room. Konohamaru was still in a sour mood and said, My stomach kind of hurts, I think ate too much. I'm going to lie down. Sakura stood alone in the kitchen where the only sound was the running water and her hands scrubbing the dishes clean. She dried them and set them back in the cabinet before turning around to head up to her bedroom. Sakura slowly climbed the stairs as she thought. I'm sorry everyone, but I have to keep you all out of what is about to happen. I hope I didn't give Konohamaru too much sleeping drought, but I had to make sure he stays knocked out until we leave. I should have about 2 hours before it takes its full effect on them. Hanabi, I know you might hate me for the rest of your life for this, but this is something the original members of Squad 7 has to take care of alone. Sakura went upstairs and suited up in her ninja gear. She carefully checked and rechecked every weapon, herb and scroll she would be taking with her. She packed her bag with enough food for all 3 of them for a week. She took along a map even though she knew the way to the sand village by heart. She closed her eyes and went over her plan again and again in her mind until the 2 hours had passed. The house was silent as she slowly crept downstairs and entered Naruto's bedroom. Hanabi was sleeping near him on the floor curled up in a ball. Sakura took one look at Naruto and thought, his breathing is getting slightly faster, he will wake up soon. I have to get Hanabi back to her room and make sure Naruto doesn't see me tailing him. She set her pack outside the door and picked Hanabi up in her blanket. She carried her upstairs to her bed and tucked her in. Sakura stared at her face for a long moment before brushing her hair out of her eyes. I know you are one of the strongest ninjas in the village, Hanabi. And I know you love Naruto with all your heart. Please forgive me for this and be strong. Sakura reached down and hugged Hanabi while she slept. She stood up and walked over to the turn before turning back to look at Hanabi. Next to Naruto and Sasuke, you are my greatest friend even if we did not know each other that long. Goodbye, Hanabi Hyuga. We will probably never meet again. Sakura turned to close the door behind her. She went back downstairs and dug in her pack for a moment. She pulled out a syringe that was already filled with a clear liquid. She eyed the syringe for a moment as she softly said to herself, "All right, Naruto, I'm going to use every bit of what Lady Tsunade taught me to help you." She walked over to him and injected him in the arm as he slept. She quickly grabbed her pack and went outside of the house. She headed to the far left side of gate and hid in the wall's shadow. It was nearing midnight and the half-moon shone brightly in the sky. Sakura watched Naruto through his bedroom window from the great distance. "It's almost time, Naruto. You should wake any minute, then we will leave to fight the greatest battle we have ever faced, the battle for your soul," she said without emotion or doubt. She had long ago accepted what this day might bring. Naruto only saw blackness, but heard heavy breathing that almost seemed to growl. The breaths grew louder and louder with each passing moment. Naruto searched the darkness but couldn't find where the noise was coming from. Two glowing red eyes opened before him as the outline of the nine-tailed fox became clear. "Naruto, it is time." Kyuubi's voice boomed in his head and her last word echoed in his thoughts. He slowly opened his red eyes and took no notice that he was floating 2 feet off of his bed. "You can sleep no longer, we must go," Ruby told him as her words echoed in his mind. He floated off of the bed and onto his feet in front of the closet. Naruto showed no emotion as he strapped on his ninja gear and set the Thunder God sword to its place at his hip. He spoke no words for there were none to say and they both knew it. They had already agreed to this long ago. Naruto stumbled like he was drunk out into the night clutching his breaking seal. Sakura followed him from a distance as to not be seen. But she was seen. There were 6 squads of Umbu following them from the shadows intent on protecting their hero. In the village council room the debate of who the rightful Hokage should be was in full swing. Hayashi led those that felt Lady Tsunade was the rightful Hokage whereas Choza led those that felt Naruto was the Hokage. "How many times are we going to go through this, Choza? Lady Tsunade is the rightful Hokage. She is the granddaughter of the first Hokage and was appointed by the Lord of Fire," Hayashi said. "Oh, my old friend, but how can the Lord of Fire appoint her? It states that only a Hokage can appoint his successor and the Lord of Fire needs to approve of the choice. There is no law or document that gives the Lord of Fire that power," Choza countered. "We have also been over that, Choza. That was why both councils of the village appointed her. How else could we have done it when the Hokage's secret test was lost to us? Would you have preferred we had chosen no Hokage at all?" Hayashi said. "That still makes Tsunade a steward Hokage, Hayashi, surely you see that. Naruto fulfilled all the requirements and has passed the Hokage test set down for him by our former Hokages. He is our rightful Hokage," Choza stated. "He has not fulfilled all of the requirements to become Hokage. He never received approval from the Lord of Fire," Hayashi said. "You saw how much respect the Lord of Fire had for him with your own eyes at your holiday party. The only ones that spoke to him as his equal were Lady Tsunade and Naruto. He didn't even scold him for his speaking to him that way," Choza countered. "Naruto friendly speaking with the Lord of Fire does not account for being approved to become Hokage," Hayashi said in exasperation. Shibi's head was on the table in misery as he thought. "Kami, that it's been 3 days of this. They just keep going around and around. Why did I have to get promoted to the village council? This is like voluntary torture." Shibi was not alone, most of the other council members were clearly not happy to still be debating this same subject. Some were tired, some others' eyes had long ago glazed over and still some were sleeping in their chairs. Hayashi and Choza continued to go back and forth for what seemed like forever. "Enough! Koharu said. We have heard every detail of this debate so many times we could all recant it in our sleep. Hayashi will not relent until approval from the Lord of Fire has been shown. Choza will not relent because should Naruto be the rightful Hokage, it would strip the High Council of being able to order the resealing of the beast. This debate is obviously hung. As Speaker of Village Council, I call for a vote tomorrow morning. Unless anyone has anything new to add, we will adjourn for the night. The door to the council room opened and everyone turned to see Kakashi standing in the doorway. What is it now, Kakashi? If it doesn't pertain to this debate, I ask that you leave. We were just about to adjourn for the day, Koharu said in a tired voice. Kakashi smiled and said, Then it seems I've made it just in time. Yes, it does pertain to this debate. Groans of tired council members wishing only to go home filled the room. No need to sound displeased. This will only take a moment, he said as he pulled out a royal red Kage scroll. Koharu gave him an exhausted look and said, How is that supposed to help this debate, Kakashi? That is an official Kage scroll from the Lord of Fire to the Hokage. You would need Tsunade to open it for it to be of any relevance, if it's any at all. You had best hurry then, because we are voting tomorrow morning. Kakashi smiled as he tossed the scroll onto the table. Well, it is of relevance because Lady Tsunade can't not open that scroll, he said knowingly. Kakashi, I'm in no mood to play a guessing game. Just make your point so we can all go home. We are all very tired. Hamura said. You know how the Kage scrolls are sealed, I take it. The scroll is sealed with a Hokage seal followed by the mark of their clan. So a scroll sealed for Lady Tsunade would literally ready Hokage Tsunade Senju. This scroll seal, however, does not read that way, Kakashi said. Hayashi picked up the scroll and read the seal. His eyes went wide in shock. Well, we don't have all day, Lord Hyuga. What does the seal read? Koharu said in a tired tone. It reads, Hokage, Naruto, Namikaze. This a true Hokage scroll for Naruto using his true name. This is without a doubt the Lord of Fire's approval for Naruto's right to become Hokage, he said soullessly as the scroll slipped from his hands and clattered to table. Kakashi smiled at the exhausted elders that scowled at him. Now you are powerless to stop him, you can no longer stand in the way of the Child of Destiny's path. Not that you or anyone else in this village could stand in his way anyway, he thought to himself. Naruto struggled in pain to keep moving forward in the dark, empty streets while clutching the breaking seal on his chest. Sakura shadowed him from far behind him while unseen Umbu guarded his every step from the shadows. Naruto was leaning on the sides of building and fighting to take each step as he moved closer and closer to the Hokage Tower. Tsunade normally hated her paperwork but found that tonight she didn't mind it so much. The door to her office was open and no Umbu guard stood at the entryway. A cool breeze came through the door and out her open window. She quietly went through proposals and filled out replies like it was any other day. She felt nothing, not happy or sad or worried or even anxious. She felt calm and ready. She knew this feeling well. She had felt it so many times before. It was always just before a very dangerous battle that she knew that she might not walk away from. A calm that comes from accepting that you might not come back alive. The calm before the storm. She carefully went over a mission request and marked down a squad to handle it, all the while a sound grew closer and closer to her. The sound could only be described as someone dragging something hard against the railing surrounding the steps going up the Hokage Tower. The sound would emit and then stay quiet for a few seconds, then again the sound would come and fall silent. Tsunade worked carefully on her paperwork until the sound was right outside her door. Just outside the door, Naruto red demonic eyes looked at the open door to Tsunade's office. His clawed right hand was on the railing for support while his left held the painfully breaking seal. He took 3 sharp breaths and then dragged his claws up the railing. The metal screeched as his claws left marks in the metal and he gripped the railing once more. He pulled himself up the last step and onto the small platform outside her office. He staggered and had to catch himself from falling on the doorway. He regained his balance and slowly moved into her office, clutching the seal. Tsunade watched him fight for every step he took until he stopped in front of her desk breathing hard. "So do you have come, Naruto?" Tsunade said quietly. He threw his head back and stood up straight. Tsunade could see Kyuubi's chakra burning brightly in his red eyes. But also in his eyes held his determination that would never give up no matter how hard things got. "Yes, mother, I have come," Naruto strained to say while catching his breath. She looked at him and did well to contain her sorrow. "I think you should know that the village council is taking a vote tomorrow. They are going to vote on if you or I is the rightful Hokage, and it's most likely they will name you as the rightful Hokage, Naruto." Naruto gave her a few strained laughs through his pain as he squinted at her. "What the hell do those old farts know? You're the Hokage and I'm not going to take the title through some underhanded means. It doesn't matter what the council thinks. The passing on of the title of Hokage is between the Hokage and their successor. It doesn't matter what they think at all. They can decree until they're blue in the face for all I care. You're still the Hokage until you give me the title yourself," he said. Even in his voice was the undertones to the fox's rage. The rage he is holding back in his eyes. It must be unbearable. How can even he do such a thing? Tsunade thought sadly. She looked down as she clutched her elbows as tears of pain welled up in her eyes. "Mother, I just came to say goodbye," Naruto said. "Please," she said in a trembling voice. "Don't go, I'll make you Hokage right now. Just please reseal the fox, I know you can do it," she begged him as she looked up and tears rolled down her face. "Please," she said so honestly with all her might. "Please don't go." Naruto shook his head and said, "I can't do that. I have to fight Kyuubi or I'll break my Nindo. I already promised my great uncle. Nagato. If there is such a thing as peace, then I will seize it." "Naruto!" Tsunade yelled at him in pain as she stood up from her chair. "You have no chance of killing the nine-tailed fox. Even your father, the greatest of the Hokages, couldn't land a single wound on the beast. That's why he sealed it. That was the only option he could make." She yelled at him in anger through her tears. Naruto's pulps narrowed into cat slits as his anger and offense at Tsunade rose. "I'm not trying to kill the nine-tailed fox." He looked at her in outrage until his eyes glowed crimson. He raised his right hand above his head as it became encased in flaming red chakra just as he brought it down on her desk. His clawed hand seared through a 2-inch stack of her paperwork, rendering it to ash, and burned his clawed hand print deep into her desk. "I'm trying to redeem her." Naruto's voice and Kyuubi's spoke as one in an ear-splitting angry roar as his hand smoldered on her desk. Tsunade looked like Naruto had stabbed her through the heart. She was so stunned. Such power, they spoke as one. "I've never felt such frightening power before. The nine-tailed fox is female? She's trying to redeem her?" She thought soullessly as Naruto's intense stare and growling breath was on her. She backed away from him in timid fear before mastering herself against the far window. "Naruto, you are insane. How could you ever think anyone, even yourself, would be capable of such a feat? How could you have mercy against a being of pure evil and hatred? If you are going to fight her, then at least fight with your full power and not to redeem her. This isn't a human you can turn into a friend like Gaara." She screamed at him in tears and shock as her trembling voice begged him. "No, I will not. I could have easily killed Ruby long ago, but as you know, I would have died as well. I seek true peace not only for humans, but for all," Naruto said as he turned towards the door and started moving away. "Naruto," she said as tears slid down her face and she smiled. "If you defeat or kill the Kyuubi demon, you will be the Hokage. There will no longer be any doubt as to who is the strongest, but I'm betting the title of Hokage that you won't succeed." Tears rained down her smiling face as she said, "After all, I've never had any luck at gambling." The sadness and doubt shined through her smiling face. Naruto turned his head over his shoulder and looked at her with wild demonic eyes that boiled with an eternity of pain and hatred. He turned fully around and pointed his clawed hand at her. "I'll take that bet. You just keep my seat nice and warm. When I get back, I'll be the Hokage." he said confidently. Tsunade couldn't even bear to watch him go. She covered her eyes and wiped the tears out of them. Before she realized it, he was gone, and the only thing telling her that he was ever there was the screech of his demonic claws on the railing as he made his way slowly down the tower. She felt hollow and empty as she stepped out the window and made her way to the opposite corner of the Hokage Tower. Kakashi was sitting on the ledge of the tower watching Naruto leave. She sat down next to Kakashi and wrapped her arms around her knees as she watched the tiny glimmers of red chakra twinkling out of Naruto from the distance. Small flames of red chakra floated through the breaking seal and around him, and he dragged his body forward. "Are you okay, Tsunade?" Kakashi asked quietly. Tsunade shook her head silently on her knees before looking over at him. "You were right, Kakashi, I couldn't stop him. His destiny is too strong. Everything I've been planning for years to try to keep him here fell apart the moment I saw his eyes. I couldn't do anything, I just felt so powerless," she said in a lost manner. Kakashi watched Naruto's figure grow smaller as he moved further away. "Don't worry, Tsunade. He will be back. He is the next Hokage after all, but that isn't what he is fighting hardest for," Kakashi reassured her. "Then what is he fighting so hard for?" Tsunade asked as she looked over at him. "Surely you already know that, Lady Tsunade. It is obvious. He calls you his mother. He thinks of Sasuke, Gaara, and Konohamaru as his brothers, and he even considers the third to be his grandfather. What he wants more than even the title of Hokage is what he never had. He wants a family of his own, and I'm sure you know who he is going to look to provide that family for him. It is for her that he will fight hardest for, and that is the reason he will return to us," Kakashi said. "He is not coming back." She smiled hollowly at him through her bloodshot eyes. "At least that's what I bet him." Naruto dragged himself down the street clutching the burning seal as he struggled against the pain. "Damn it! I'm still too weak. I didn't have time to master the other two sub-elements. Without them the jutsu is useless, I just don't have any more time." Naruto thought and then shook his head to clear his thought. "No, I can't ask for help this time, it's all up to me, I'll just have to manage somehow," he thought as he approached the main gate. "You didn't think I was going to let you go alone, did you, Naruto?" Sasuke said as he walked out from beside the shadowy gateway. Naruto panted hard while holding the breaking seal as the red chakra-like flames slowly floated around him. He had one of his eyes closed, trying to endure the pain as Sasuke said, "Naruto, I meant what I promised you. If you couldn't master everything you needed for this jutsu, then I would come to fill in the parts you couldn't do." Naruto panted hard for a long moment in thought before saying, "I'm sorry, Sasuke, I can't take you with me, not this time. I have to do this alone." Sasuke smiled at him and said, "No, Naruto, I've already decided to come with you. I'm going to make amends for all the wrongs I have done by helping you," Naruto said in a strained, pained voice. "You can't go, Sasuke. You'll die from being exposed to the fox's chakra before you could ever help me. I can't put you in danger." Sasuke laughed softly and said, "I already told you that I wanted my death to be more meaningful than to rot away in an old house as a blind man. I know you hate the idea of fate and destiny, but the fact remains the same, you and I, our fates are connected and we will always make each other stronger." Naruto gritted his teeth and said, "You're damned right, I hate the idea of fate. You make your own destiny. That is why you have to stay here. And you made yours the day you decided to never give up on me, my friend. You are hardly in any condition to argue with me, so let us be off," Sasuke said calmly as he turned around and walked through the gate. "Besides, if anyone saw you right now, they would think you were some kind of monster and flee while screaming. If nothing else, I can keep them away from you or warn them you are coming." Naruto stood still as he watched Sasuke walking up the dark road for a long moment before saying quietly, "Thanks, Sasuke." Naruto started slowly moving forward again down the road. Sakura followed behind them from a great distance as not to be seen. The 6 Umbu squads that had been shadowing Naruto the whole time watched them go. Among them the Rookie 9, Neji, Rock Lee, Tenten and even Ino were sent as his protectors. Shikamaru took off his fox mask and said, Squad 7 is finally reunited after all these years and they are leading on their most dangerous mission yet. He turned his mask around in his hand and stared at the fox picture on it. He looked down from the top of the building he was on and said, Either the nine-tailed fox will be no more soon or we will never see them again. Let's send our heroes off with honor. Shikamaru stood up and placed his right fist over his heart while looked out the gate at Naruto's fading light. The rest of the Umbu stood up from their shadowy hiding place and saluted them in the same way as Sakura crept out the gate behind them. I've never wanted to stand by your side more than right now, Naruto, but I know I'd only get in your way. I guess the only thing I can do for you is wish you good luck. Shikamaru said and then bowed his head. Well said. Kakashi said from beside him with his fist over his heart as Razor Wing flew over his head carrying an official Kage scroll for Gaara. The fastest hawk in both the Fire Nation and the Wind Nation flew slightly out into the night. Naruto neither ate nor slept as he traveled to the Land of Wind. He just kept moving forward with a driving purpose that burned like the chakra coming out of him. After hours of walking in the night he thought, just don't know if I have the strength to keep going. Naruto swooned and almost fell forward, but a flaming paw shot out of his chest and braced itself on the ground holding him up. Right. Another flaming paw shot out of his back and braced itself on the ground as well. The light from the paws lit up the surrounding area with an eerie red glow. The two fox paws moved to his sides and helped him to keep staggering forward. Sakura saw everything happening from 200 feet behind him. It's really happening, the fox has already started to come out. She thought sadly. The further they traveled the more the Kyuubi's chakra came out of him. By dawn the fox's chakra ears were coming out of his head and by dusk the whole spectral head of the fox surrounded his own. 2 days later. Sasuke was walking down the main road with white bandages over his empty eye sockets and a walking stick in his hand. He heard a familiar sound that he had been hearing for days. The clack of wagon wheels on the road coming from just around the next bend. Soon a merchant cart with a squad of sand ninjas came up the road in the waning hours of the night. They were likely just making a delivery to one of the nearby towns. Sasuke stepped in front of the cart and held up his open hand. Halt! He said. The tallest of the ninjas came before him and said, I don't know who you are, but if you're a bandit then you're picking a fight with the wrong ninjas. I am no bandit. I am Sasuke Uchiha of the Land of Fire. I've only stopped you to tell you that it is in your best interest to take your cart into the woods and wait for the red lights to pass. The large ninja laughed as he crossed his arms and said, And if we don't, are you gonna make us, little man? Sasuke tipped his walking stick forward and started moving up the road. No, I didn't come here to pick a fight with Sand Ninja. I just came to warn you that you are putting your life in danger should you not heed my warning. Another of the ninjas said sarcastically and teasingly. What, are you gonna tell me some big scary monster is heading up the road? Sasuke continued on as he said. The scariest monster you could possibly imagine is heading up this road. It is being held back by the strongest man in all the 5 nations, the great sage and hero Naruto Uzumaki. You will know when it is getting closer by the red glow it gives off. I will tell you only this. If you do let your curiosity get the better of you, do not attack it unless you want it to turn you into a pile of ash. Just make sure to get your cart off the road before it does that to you though. Naruto is fighting hard enough without your cart in his path. And if such a beast is heading for the Sand Village, you should know we are duty-bound to inform the Kazekage, the large ninja said before Sasuke cut him off while still walking away. The Kazekage already knows we are coming. He is the one that invited us, or didn't you know that the Kazekage owes Naruto 3 life debts? I'm done talking to you. You will understand soon enough since you do not believe me. Sasuke said as he slowly made his way out of the forest and into the open desert night. One of the shorter ninjas turned to the large ninja and said, Akori, are you really going to believe that blind man's gibberish? Akori turned back towards the road and said, Come on. You know there is no way that man was Sasuke Uchiha, the man that held the world hostage. Sasuke wouldn't dare step out of the Leaf Village for fear of being killed. And the great sage Naruto would never bring a beast to the hidden sand. He and Gaara are like brothers. Come on, let's go. There is no need to delay any further. Over the words of an insane blind man, he stopped in mid-sentence as his eyes went wide while staring up the road. A dim red glow was shining from the ground up the road from a nearby bend in the path. The glow moved up and down like someone carrying a lantern while walking. Brighter and brighter the glow became as the moments passed. Akori said in shock and fear, "Get the cart off the road now." One of the others gave the logger man a confused look and said, "What? Get the cart off the road now." He yelled frantically as he grabbed the horse pulling the cart and forcibly led it off into the grass. "Boss, what's gotten?" one of the others started to say before catching sight of the red glow himself. The ninja froze as the light grew brighter and brighter until the massive front paw of the nine-tailed fox stepped into view. The earth hissed and smoked under the paw. Soon another massive paw came into view, and then the entire spectral form of the Kyuubi rounded the bend. The chakra beast's body burned in crimson's red chakra, and it towered even above the tallest trees. Naruto dragged himself forward underneath it while encased in its chakra. Each step they took burned their prints into the ground. The prints would glow for a moment and then quickly harden into glass. Their footprints of glass stretched out behind them for miles. Every 20 feet there would be a print from Kyuubi on each side of Naruto's footprints. Slowly they moved forward and passed the four ninja frozen in fear at the sight of them. It only took them 6 minutes until they were out of sight, but it was the longest 6 minutes of Akori's life. Sakura walked slowly up the path behind them to the side of their smoldering footprints. She would normally wait to stop to help the sand ninja, but she knew she didn't have time. She was readying her thought and nerves for the battle to come. She continued on without ever giving them a look. They walked out into the blowing sands of the desert an hour before dawn. They reached the great sand cliff outside the evacuated sand village just as the eastern skies started to glow pink and gold. At the great fissure that led through the cliff, Kazekage Gaara stood waiting for them without any fear in his eyes. Naruto stopped and lifted his head up to look at Gaara. "I made it," Naruto said in a strained demonic voice while holding the seal that was nearly broken in pain. Gaara nodded his head and calmly said, "Yes, you did, old friend. I see that you were right. Ruby kept her word just like you said she would." Gaara turned his head up and looked right into the eyes of Kyuubi before saying, "Thank you for keeping your word. You are honorable just like he said you were." The nine-tailed fox lowered its massive head down to Gaara's level. "I do not need thanks from a mortal. I have my pride. Know this, if I didn't have an agreement with my host, I would rip you to shreds right now. Not because you were a host yourself, but because your people have imprisoned my kind for ages. One day you will answer to me for your people's actions. You have time, however. You are not my first target after I achieve my freedom." Kyuubi's voice boomed as its eyes burned brighter. Gaara and Sasuke never flinched after hearing Kyuubi's true voice for the first time, but Sakura jumped with a start as she was walking over to them. "It's been so long since I've seen them all together like this," the Leaf's famous Squad 7 reunited to face the most powerful of the tailed beast. Sakura and Sasuke are ready to die to help him. I can tell they are. I worry for you though, Naruto. I see something in your eyes that I never thought I would see. Doubt. There is no doubt in the fox's eyes. I only see determination. I hope the Kyuubi wasn't the source of your self-belief and never give up attitude." Gaara thought. "Isis, everything ready?" Naruto asked before collapsing onto his knees while panting hard. He nodded his head as Sakura timidly came up and took her place next to Sasuke. "Yes, Naruto. I've evacuated the village just in case. Only me and my chronicler are left in the village." Gaara looked at him for a long time and then said, "You have made it farther than anyone else could have hoped to make it with a breaking shield. I will help you by making the last leg of your journey for you." Gaara put his hands together as he closed his eyes. He summoned a great amount of chakra inside of him as the ground started to quake. He strained with all his might and lifted the four of them up into the air on a giant sand disk. Gaara opened his eyes and said, "This sand will take you to the heart of the desert, Naruto. The only thing I can tell you is I believe in you, my friend. Defeat the fox and become a Hokage like no other." Naruto looked down at him from high in the air and said through gritted teeth, "Remember your promise, Gaara." "I would die before I broke that promise, Naruto. Never lose heart, never forget who you are fighting for, great hero of the 5 nations." Gaara yelled back to him with pride as the sand disk rose higher into the air and sped off over the cliffs heading for the heart of the desert. After they were long out of sight, Matsuri carefully walked out from the fissure between the cliffs and asked, "Master Gaara, is everything going to be okay?" Gaara looked to the dawning sun and then turned to her. "Even Kami doesn't know that, Matsuri." There was doubt in his eyes, but not in his heart. Even now he is fighting for that glimmer of hope. Gaara said as he turned back toward the village. "So the great sage's strength rests on his feelings for Hanabi?" Matsuri said and then smiled. "I think we are going to be just fine then, master." They speed over the desert for most of the day. The sun was nearing dusk in the western horizon. Sasuke stood at the front of the disc facing forward in silence. He merely waited for the arrival of the battle with unwavering resolve. Sakura seemed troubled since they left Gaara at the cliff fissure. She kept glancing over at Naruto on his back under the Kyuubi and up to the demon's eyes. Kyuubi only faced forward like Sasuke, awaiting the battle to come in unmoving silence. Something inside of Sakura was eating away at her until she finally found the courage to ask, "Kyuubi." She spoke to the demon, but she did not move or reply as the moments dragged on. "Kyuubi! Why are you so calm when all we know of you is hate and destruction? Why are you willingly going to a battlefield to fight Naruto?" She yelled to the fox. "I am not hard of hearing, human girl. As for how your people see me, well, let us say it is their own fault I'm like this. You should understand well enough already why I haven't attacked anyone and have come willingly to fight my host at the battleground of his choosing." Kyuubi's massive voice boomed without ever looking at her. Sakura shook her head and said, "No, I don't understand. Can't you just leave him in peace? Both of you have already suffered so much together. Why must you fight each other? You are incapable of understanding that," answered human girl. "You are not an eternal and you have no idea what it means to have everlasting life," the fox said without giving her a glance. Sakura yelled up at her. "No, I couldn't imagine what that is like, but it doesn't explain why you are so set on fighting him. He can't even stand up. What point is there in killing him?" The Kyuubi chuckled manically at her and said, "You think he cannot fight? You foolish human. You understand so little that is happening before your very eyes. Even in his current condition he could level the most powerful of your kind's villages. I know every facet of his being and I could kill him even now with barely any effort. Then why haven't you? What are you so set on fighting him in the middle of the desert?" Sakura asked. "Because he is the first human or mortal that has earned my respect in a very long time. Do not think that Naruto doesn't want to fight me as well. He has been training himself knowing that sooner or later this day would come. You think you know him so well, yet you do not," Kyuubi said shortly. "I do know him. If he didn't have to fight you, he wouldn't," Sakura said confidently. "I'll have you know he wanted to leave you with Gaara before we left. It was only because of me that you were allowed to come this far. Are you still going to tell me you know what is in his heart?" Kyuubi asked her. Sakura looked down in sad indecision for a moment and then said, "So you're telling me you have some reason that you wanted me to come along? Well, forget it. I will not help you," she yelled at the fox. "It is not me you will be helping," Kyuubi said ominously as they speed across the desert. A few moments later the disk of sand slowed down and started drifting downward. Sakura caught sight of something glinting in the fading daylight. As they drifted closer to the ground, she saw what it was. It was one of Naruto's cobalt blue spirit marker. The sand disk touched a dune and crumbled away, leaving them all out in the middle of the hot desert. There was nothing around them but sand. No plants or life could be seen, only dune after dune of endless sand as far as the eye could see. Naruto was laying on the ground encased in red chakra. "Erg!" he said in pain as he clenched his teeth. "We're here, Naruto. It is time for me to come out fully. It is time for you to keep your promise and release me," Kyuubi said to him as she towered over his body. Naruto strained to lift his arms into hand signs, and with all his strength he said, "Nine-prong seal release." Naruto screamed in pain as the red chakra around him started flowing into the nine-tailed fox's spectral form. Sakura looked at him writhing in pain with despair sinking into her heart. She reached out her hand and went to take a step toward him when Sasuke caught her arm. "No, Sakura, you cannot go to him. There is nothing you can do for him right now. You just have to wait until this is over," Sasuke said calmly. Sakura looked over at him with tears welling in her eyes and his lips trembling and said, "Oh, how can you expect me to wait, Sasuke? He's dying over there. Don't you care at all what is happening to him?" "Of course I care, Sakura. This is exactly why Naruto didn't want you to come. He knew you wouldn't handle this well. You have to keep calm, otherwise you will not be able to help him when the time comes. If you run to him now and touch the fox's chakra, you will be turned to ash," Sasuke said calmly. Naruto convulsed wildly as he arched his back and screamed in both his voice and Kyuubi's demonic voice. His ear-shattering roar of pain echoed off the sandy dunes for miles around as the chakra started moving out of the seal faster. Sakura resolved herself to stay by Sasuke's side and shed her tears of despair quietly. A few minutes later, the bones of the Kyuubi's feet started to sprout and slowly grew up its body. After 20 minutes, the bones of the last tail had formed and the muscles started to form around its skull. 2 hours later, the final tail finished growing its hair and the last of the Kyuubi's chakra left Naruto. The nine-tailed fox was whole once more. Naruto fell limp and lifeless onto the desert sand. Sasuke remained calm and composed the entire time. Sakura worried for him at first but now gazed on his body soullessly in shock, unable to move or look away. The nine-tailed fox body was not encased in glowing red chakra and its fur was a light amber color. Its many tails were not writhing behind it like snake about to attack, but laid flat fan out on the sands behind it as it sat up. Kyuubi's eyes did not glow crimson red with hate, but they were a vibrant green like the deepest of forests during the summer. Although she would normally be an imposing sight towering over 100 feet into the air, she seemed diminutive with her head hunched over low looking at Naruto. She looked at him almost sadly like he was a friend she played too rough with and killed him by mistake. No one moved for a long moment as a gust of wind howled across the desert landscape while all of them watched Naruto's unmoving body. Naruto's skin was deathly white and his closed eyes were sunken into his head. No breaths came to his silent body. His once prominent black whisker marks on his cheeks had faded away. Charred cracked trails of blood went down each corner of his mouth to the edges of his cheeks. He's dead, he died, his body couldn't take it after all. Naruto. No one deserved a happy life more than you. Sakura thought and wanted to cry, but she had already given him every tear she had and could only cover her eyes and sob softly. Kyuubi stared at him for a long moment before turning her massive head and eyes to Sakura. "Sakura," the nine-tailed fox said. Its voice was not hateful, but light, wistful, enchanting and almost beautiful as it radiated its sadness and desire. Kyuubi looked at her with lost eyes and begged her, "Heal him." The fox's words echoed in her mind over and over, shaking her very being as her eyes went wide in disbelief. A gust of wind howled over the desert and across Sakura's frozen face. Kyuubi's pleading voice came again. "Sakura, please, there isn't much time. His life grows dim. In another moment his life force will fade away." So this is what the fox meant by helping. She wasn't talking about helping her at all, she was talking about helping Naruto. Sakura thought in stunned realization. Sasuke reached down and put his hand on her shoulder and said, "Sakura, you have to help him, this is why you came, isn't it?" "Sakura." Sasuke shook her by her shoulders. Her head rolled limply on her shoulders, but her blank stare continued. How could the nine-tailed fox want me to heal Naruto? Doesn't she want him dead? Isn't he already dead? She was lost in her soulless thoughts. Sakura, it's not like you to choke like this. Naruto needs you now. Sasuke said intensely as he reached his hand back behind him and slapped her across the face. The powerful strike sent her onto all fours as it echoed across the landscape. Sakura's left cheek started to swell up red and she shook her head to come back out of her thoughts. She took in several sharp breaths before looking forward to Naruto's chakra-charred body. Go, help him, Sakura! Sasuke yelled at her firmly as he pointed to Naruto. Sakura slowly rose to her feet with a sad, empty expression on her face as she walked over to Naruto's body. His unmarked face was pale white and his eyes were sunken into his eye sockets. The skin on his hands had been seared away and she feared she would find far worse damage around the seal area. Sakura kneeled down to him in front of the most dangerous being in existence without any fear for her own well-being. The only thing that mattered in her empty eyes was the friend she had to save, even if it cost her her life. She cupped her hand on his pale cheek to check for a pulse. Even in the heat of the desert his body was rapidly cooling. If it was anyone else, even Tsunade, she would have pronounced them dead and not even have tried. But the one thing she had learned from being his teammate was to never give up on him. She held out her pointer finger and it glowed blue with chakra. She grabbed a hold of the front of his black skin-tight shirt and used her chakra scalpel to cut it open. She turned her head and winced at the damage, far worse than she feared. Naruto's chest had sustained heavy chakra damage. What was left of the original seal the fourth Hokage placed on him remained untouched. Most of the rest of his chest had not only the skin but the muscle burned away. His exposed rib bones shimmered in the fading light as she swallowed hard, trying to master herself at the sight of the grotesque wound. She took a long deep breath and released it slowly as she placed her hands over the wound and green chakra flowed out of her hands. The muscle and skin started to regrow slowly. Sakura forced herself to distance herself from Naruto and all that he meant to her. She forced herself to see him as just another patient and do what she had to save his life. She entered an almost robotic-like state while healing him as the eternity of the minutes ticked by. Naruto's body still remained unmoving. No breath or life came to his once vibrant eyes. Sakura touched both hands to the green diamond mark on her forehead as she asked, "QB, you have healed him so many times even when anyone else, ninja or Jinchuriki, would have died. Why is it that now you need me to save him? Couldn't you just heal him yourself? Doesn't your healing power far outstrip my own?" "No, I cannot. We were once one chakra network. Now we are two. I never healed him like you think. He simply was linked to my regenerative capabilities. When we were one, it was very unlikely that anything would be able to kill him because of that. Now that we are two, he is cut off from that ability, so I cannot help him anymore. Even if I could, I would not help him, not because I do not want to, but because of our agreement," QB told her. Sasuke gritted her teeth as she swallowed hard. She shook her head sadly in confusion as she continued to focus on her green diamond seal and said, "I just don't understand. You want Naruto alive, yet you would refuse to heal him if you could? You make no sense whatsoever. You contradict yourself at every turn." "No," the nine-tailed fox said as she shook her head at Sakura and said, "I do not. You fail to understand me. You are not an eternal, so you have no idea of the meanings behind my words. You can't comprehend the answer to the question you have asked me. You have precious little time as it is to save his fading light, yet you still waste time questioning me. Sakura, just focus on the task at hand. You don't need to be an eternal to understand her words. They both want this fight. Neither of them would aid the other, because to aid your competitor would be taken as a sign of disrespect, Sakura," Sasuke said while slowly walking up to her side. Sakura closed her eyes in concentration and took a deep breath while both her hands pointing toward the green diamond mark on her forehead. "It's still stupid. It's just like all the times I couldn't stop you and Naruto from fighting. I just feel so helpless," she said with a trembling voice full of frustration and sadness. Sasuke sighed and said, "Then take it as fate, Sakura. This is the fate the Kami gave them the day they were born. When these two beings became one, the wheels of fate were set into motion that one day they would face each other in combat. That is their destiny, Sakura. Sakura shook her head while still drawing up chakra. No, Sasuke. Of all the lessons Naruto taught me, there is one I'll never relent from. You make your own fate, she said with conviction as her eyes snapped open and her body was encased in green healing chakra that danced wildly around her body. Sakura, what are you doing? Sasuke asked in shock. Sakura had already closed her eyes in concentration, again molding the chakra around her with her sheer willpower. She stood still for a long moment, forming the chakra into the shape that she needed it in before saying, Cubed, I don't possess Naruto's greatest power. I can't forgive you. I still hate you no matter how hard I try to see things from Naruto's point of view. However, you did give me the perfect parting words to tell him how I feel. How to express just how much I care for him and how to truly say how much I'm sorry. This is what you gave me, so I thank you for that. She took in a ragged deep breath as Sasuke thought. The way she is saying that, it sounds like she is about to use a forbidden jutsu that is going to cost her her life. I must be prepared to use that jutsu if I must. She steeled her breathing and gritted her teeth before emotionally saying, Sasuke. Please give Naruto a message for me. She begged him without ever breaking her concentration. Sasuke swallowed hard and then softly said, Of course, Sakura, I'll tell him whatever you wish. Sakura began to sob as she strained to say, Tell him that I always loved him best. That I am sorry that I was a stupid fool for hurting him for all those years. Tell him that when I realized that he was the one I loved the most, that the only thing I could do to show him that love was help him and Hanabi's relationship. When he asks why I did this, tell him that I don't want him to feel an ounce of sadness for me. Tell him, a life for a life. My debt to him is repaid. Just tell him that I love him and that I'll be watching over him from above. And if we are ever born again into this world together, that I will make him the happiest person in the world. Please. Just tell him that I love him and Sakura coped on her sobs for a long tense moment before being able to continue. She took in a long unsteady breath and looked over at Sasuke with swollen bloodshot eyes and said, And tell him that after he beats that stupid demon fox, he better not live every day of his life to the happiest he can with Hanabi. Sasuke. Sasuke nodded solemnly at her pained smile and said, I understand, Sakura. I will tell him this for you. She turned back to Naruto and closed her eyes while the green chakras surrounding her danced like flames. This is it, I can finally pay you back for all the times you protected me. This is why I became a sage. For this single moment, all for you and your dream for having a family of your own. Even if you die, I'll bring you back. I watched Elder Chio carefully when she used her life reincarnation jutsu on Gaara just in case I ever needed to use it on you. First I have to heal the damage from the seal breaking. This is just too much damage for me to heal it without transferring and breaking my seal. If it was just one of these jutsus, I would have complete confidence in myself, but to use my sacred slug sage power jutsu and a powerful transfer jutsu and finally to mix what is left of my chakra with my life force and feed it to him. Even Lady Tsunade has never attempted so many high-level medical ninjutsu in a row. No one has tried it because it would mean certain death. Yet try I must. I'm nervous to give up my life, but I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to give you my life, Naruto. The only thing I'm afraid of is failure. Just this once I cannot fail, no matter the cost, no matter how much it hurts and no matter how much I want to give up. If not, then giving my life to you will have all been in vain. I can't let that happen no matter what. She thought as she shook her head in worry and frustration. Sasuke watched her grit her teeth, shake her head violently, and suddenly her look became distant. She is warring with herself. This isn't like her. What is she possibly thinking inside her head? He thought as she suddenly went into a trance-like state. Her conviction returned to her as she moved her hand's palm out into a diamond shape surrounding her forehead sage mark. She mumbled incoherently like an insane person. The green diamond sage mark on her forehead slowly split in two, and the two green triangles slowly and with great effort moved to her palms. She panted heavily from the massive amount of chakra she was spending to move the dense seal. Once the diamond-shaped seal that had been split in half was in the center to each of her palms, she moved them to Naruto's forehead. The burning green chakra flowed out of her hands as the two halves of the seal slowly moved towards each other. Her breathing became more labored the closer the seal became to being reformed. She strained with all her being, leaning more on Naruto's head than merely touching it as the two halves of the seal joined together once more on Naruto's forehead. She opened her eyes and smiled weakly at the green mark on his forehead. So that is what she is planning to do. She is going to use Tsunade's forbidden jutsu. How did she ever move such dense chakra without destroying it? Even Lady Tsunade couldn't do that, yet she somehow managed. I hope she has thought this through. Every jutsu has a risk, and the risk will likely be shared by both of them. I don't know how Slug Sage Chakra works, but I know Toad Sage Chakra reacts violently to those that can't control it. I hope Slug Sage Chakra is different. She very well might die from chakra exhaustion, and he might die from being unable to handle the chakra. Sakura, you have to be the gutsiest medic in all the 5 nations to be confident enough in your abilities to even attempt this. You truly are the best medic of our generation. You are surpassing Tsunade before my very eyes. Sasuke thought, humbled in awe. Sakura caught her breath for a moment and wiped the sweat from her tired face. Sad conviction settled her stormy mind into a calm. She put her hands together in a hand sign and said, "Sacred Seal Release. Mitotic Regeneration." The green diamond-shaped seal on his forehead glowed white for a brief moment, and then it grew into a gothic symbol that encompassed his entire face. Sakura's hands trembled and shook as she tried desperately to control the chakra in Naruto. His wounds began to smoke and heal at a rapid pace. Muscles regrew around his exposed ribs as the skin started moving inward to cover the damaged areas. Even though Sakura was fighting for her life to control the jutsu, Sasuke marveled at how quickly the grotesque wound healed. So this is Tsunade's famed jutsu that can heal any wound. I had no idea that it was this powerful, but it must carry an equally powerful risk. The green inferno of chakra around her is rapidly being eaten away. It must take massive amounts of chakra to use. She already looks like she is nearing her breaking point. Where does she find the strength to keep going on like that? Sasuke thought, and then his expression went wide in shock. Her arm, the wound Naruto gave her when he fought Orochimaru. It's fresh again. I see, what a terrible risk this jutsu has. While it heals Naruto, it unheals her. Sakura, you really do intend to give your life to Naruto, don't you? Sasuke concluded as he tilted his head down. Naruto's wounds closed just as Sakura's will faded. She screamed in pain and fell over on top of Naruto. Sakura's arms and lungs felt like they were on fire, and she panted while trying to catch her breath. The bright green chakra that surrounded her body that had once been a roaring flame now barely glowed around her outline. Damn it! Even breaking my seal and using mitotic regeneration wasn't enough. His face is still shallow-looking, devoid of any color, and his heart hasn't restarted. He's been down for over 2 minutes. I have to hurry. She thought in a panic while battling her heavy eyelids. Sakura strained to right herself several times, but only succeeded in rolling off of Naruto. Again she struggled to get onto all fours when Sasuke walked over to her and pinned her forearm to the sands. Sakura! Enough! Stay still. You have done your part. If you do any more, you will kill yourself, Sasuke said in a commanding voice. Sakura shook her head and looked at him with a desperate plea in her devastated eyes. No, Sasuke. Yo, you don't understand. His heart still isn't beating. I have to save him. Sasuke gave her a kind expression and said, I may not be a renowned medical ninja, but I have something you do not have, and I will use it to help him. Sasuke held his hand out in front of him, and a small blue bolt of lightning crackled to life in his palm. He kneeled down at Naruto's side. Sakura could hardly move and could only grab one of Naruto's wrists and pulled it over to her ear while she prayed to Kami to hear a heartbeat. He turned his hand over and pressed the bolt into Naruto's chest over his heart. His body lurched as his back arched and then went limp as Sasuke released his lightning. Sakura heard a soft whoosh as Sasuke breathed air into Naruto's lungs 3 times. Sasuke again placed his hands over Naruto's heart and jolted him with lightning. Basic first aid, that's what Sasuke is doing, and he is combining it with his lightning element trying to restart Naruto's heart. Sakura thought hopefully. Sasuke set up a steady rhythm of shocking him and breathing air into his lungs, all the while Sakura listened for the sound she hoped beyond hope that she would hear. Her hope was fading as each passing second. Come on, Naruto! Is this all it takes to take down the great hero of the 5 ninja nations? Sasuke yelled at him in frustration and then took in a deep breath and filled his lungs with air. I thought you were going to become the greatest of all the Hokages. Isn't that your dream? He yelled and took another deep breath and breathed air into him again. I thought you were a ninja that always stood back up no matter how many times you got knocked down. He yelled and then breathed air into him again. Are you not really the man that was so powerful that you ended the 4th Great Ninja War? And saved even me from the darkness? Are you not the one that chased me for years when everyone else had given up hope of redeeming me? Are you not Naruto Uzumaki, the man that will one day become Hokage? Sasuke screamed and held his hand high over his head. Naruto felt light, like he was slowly floating into the air. He was surrounded by a bright pale blue light. He heard the distant cries of a woman slowly getting farther away. That voice, I know that voice. Wait, whose voice is that? I thought I knew for a moment. He thought in muddled confusion. That there is something I have to do, but who am I and what was I supposed to do? I think it was really important. He thought, trying to remember. The fading yell of a man echoed in the distance. That voice. It's SAS.2, just forgot. I had the answer and then it just slipped away. Whose voice was that? Was he a friend or an enemy? Maybe my brother or father? His voice was so familiar. He thought intently. The fading man's voice came again, but the only word he could make out was Hokage. Hokage, what is a Hokage? Is that me? Is that my name? If I'm Hokage, then what did I do? Was I a fisherman or a sailor or a carpenter? Can't remember anything. All my memories are slipping away. He thought as he seemed to be drifting further away from the voices. He saw an image in his mind of a woman with silky straight black hair, white eyes, and she was wearing a white uniform. Whoa, who is she? She is beautiful, he said and reached out to touch the image. The image drifted further and further away from him. Who is this person to me? Why does looking at her make me feel all these strange and intense emotions? No, come back. Don't go away. Who are you? Who am I? He yelled as the image drifted and started fading away. Please tell me. Why am I here? He yelled as the image disappeared. No small bolt of lightning flickered in Sasuke's hand. His hand illuminated the darkness around them and sent the shadows dancing away from his powerful Chidori that raged in his hand. He slammed his hand down on Naruto's chest and the lightning arched and hissed through his body. The force of the blows sent Sakura rolling across the sands. The lightning in his hand slowly died down as Sakura turned over and gaped at them in shock. Naruto. Naruto! She yelled and crawled over to him desperately. Sasuke slumped on his knees and was breathing hard when Sakura made it over to him. Naruto, she said in a lost voice as she laid her head on his chest. Her face was full of despair with a glimmer of fading hope in her swollen eyes. The seconds ticked by like an eternity as she listened, almost willing herself to hear any sound from inside his chest. The wind blew a cold gust of air across the desert dunes that swept her hair out behind her. Naruto. Please. Come back to us. She prayed sadly as she shut her eyes tightly. Please. The silence across the landscape was deafening as time moved slowly forward. The more time dragged on, the more Sakura despaired. He really isn't coming back. He died. He is dead. Two knew it was a long shot, but I hoped against hope that you would survive the extraction of the Kyuubi. This is just too cruel. You are finally freed from being a Jinchuriki and then you die. You were such a bright light. You were such a good and selfless person even when everyone hated you. What kind of god would give you such a horrible fate? It's not right. It's not fair. Sakura yelled as her body trembled and she broke down into sobs while beating on his chest in frustration. Her wailing cries caused Sasuke to cringe for a moment before he looked down solemnly and knew it was over. He wanted to comfort her, but all he could do was reach out and place his hand on her shoulder as she wrapped her arms around Naruto's neck and cried inconsolably. Naruto looked through the endless pale blue light searching for the beautiful girl with white eyes. Where is she? Where did she go? He looked for her frantically, but everywhere he looked turned out to be an endless nothingness. I can almost remember her. What is her name, though? He thought in intense concentration, trying to remember her. Flashback. Naruto was sitting at a very large and ornate dining table covered in a long white tablecloth. Fine china had been set out and fancy gleaming brass 3-candle holders were on the table along with freshly cut flowers. Beside him there was a girl like the one her had seen in the image, yet she was slightly different, slightly older. A stiff-looking man entered the extravagant dining hall through a door near the back of the room. He wore a white robe with a piece of cloth tied around his waist to hold them together. Behind him followed a young girl approaching her teens in a white robe like the older man. Her hair was glossy, brown, and straight. She walked with confidence and grace. Her eyes were also white and held a serious, yet polite look. The man walked to the head of the table and the young girl took her place to the man's left, but did not sit down. Naruto and the older girl were seated to the man's right. Good evening, Naruto. I am happy you have accepted our invitation to come over for dinner. Neji is out on a mission and he cannot join us today, he said, and then looked over at the young girl standing by her chair. Ah yes. You two haven't met yet. My daughter, please introduce yourself, he said with his open palm pointed at her. She bowed slightly to the stiff man and then turned to Naruto and bowed to him. Good evening, Naruto Uzumaki. I am Hanabi Hyuga, heiress to the Hyuga clan. It is a pleasure to make your acquaintance, she said respectfully. End of flashback. Naruto's expression went wide with realization. Hanabi, Hanabi. I remember her. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, he said as memory after memory flooded his mind. I'm the son of the 4th Hokage. I'm a ninja of the village hidden in the leaves. I'm the great Toad Sage, he said. As the memories of his life passed before his eyes, the pale blue light around him would pulse white and then dim back to pale blue. Several times this happened and he felt his being slowly being pulled down. Hanabi is my disciple, Konohamaru is my apprentice, Kakashi is my sensei, he said as he sank down faster and faster. I'm a member of Squad 7 with Sakura, Sasuke, Sai, and Hanabi, he said with growing confidence as the pale blue light faded to darkness. My dream is... He floated down with the night's twinkling stars behind him towards the open desert. To become the greatest Hokage, he yelled. A huge 9-tailed fox, a sobbing pink-haired girl with red swollen eyes hugging an unmoving man on a sand dune and a blind man with his hand on the girl's shoulder was the last thing he saw. His world faded into darkness. I am the 5th Kazekage Gaara of the Land of Wind. I chronicle this event not as one of the 5 Kages, but only as a friend to the greatest man I have ever met. Naruto reached the Sand Village's great passage some time ago. He was weary and tired, but his indomitable will still held firm. I spoke with him, Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, and even the Kyuubi fox herself briefly. Sakura tailed him in secret while he took Sasuke along willingly. The 9-tailed fox's spectral form towered over Naruto, connected by a beam of ever-flowing chakra coming out of him and into the fox. The great sage and the 9-tailed fox have an agreement that neither of them will break. The Kyuubi demon is everything written about it and much more, and yet in some way it is much different. She is filled with hate and malice to the point of it being stifling to be near her, but I also sense something else. She was massive, bigger than even I imagined. She's written about as being a mindless beast of destruction, but I do not think that is entirely true. I thanked her for helping Naruto make it to the Land of Wind, and she told me how she wanted to rip me to pieces, yet she wouldn't because she would not break her promise to Naruto. So she cannot be a mindless beast, she has honor and pride and she will not break her word. In that way her and the great sage Naruto are alike. I never thought that anyone, least of all one of the tailed beasts, would achieve the hardest to receive and maintain title. It is the title Naruto alone has held for so many years alone. His title of the man of the golden word. Naruto has never broken his word, not even once. It is one of the main reasons why all of the ninja nations and even the samurai name him as a friend and comrade. In the fox's eyes I saw an unbelievable amount of inhuman hatred, malice and bitterness, and yet she fought all of those emotions just to keep her word to him. She is a terrifying sight to behold, yet she also speaks golden words that will not be broken. I see her much less as the raging beast from the stories told to frighten children and much more like a very angry and prideful being. Our words were brief but meaningful. He reminded me of my promise to him, and I will keep that promise when the time comes, even if my life is forfeit. I have sent the great sage and hero of the 5 nations to the heart of the desert using my jutsu to help ease his journey. They all arrived a short time later in the heart of the desert for Naruto's final battle. He couldn't even stand as the power over the Kyuubi slipped out of the seal, holding it as it broke. For hours he writhed in agony as the 9-tailed fox emerged from his body. Even from miles away I can clearly see the giant form of the 9-tailed fox on the horizon. After it was all over he laid still and unmoving like a corpse. Sakura used a forbidden jutsu that I cannot name for fear of breaking a Slug Clan law, but even from the great distance away from it that I was, it burned like emerald flame in the distance that was visible to me without using any jutsu. She healed his body with the jutsu, yet he still remained still. Sasuke attempted to revive him using basic first aid and using his lightning element. It appears he too has failed. His teammate Sakura has lost herself and cries mournfully while embracing him. Gaara, Matsuri said sadly with tears forming at the rims of her eyes. Gaara had one hand over his left eye, concentrating on his third eye's jutsu that he was using to watch them with started at her voice. He was standing on the top of the Kazekage Tower overlooking the desert landscape. Gaara, how can you just relay the facts like that? Don't you feel anything, master? Aren't you talking about Naruto? Isn't he the person you have been striving to be like? Isn't he the man you respect most? Matsuri questioned him in sadness as the tears broke the rims of her eyes and slid down her face. Gaara turned around slowly from the ledge on the flat of the Kazekage Tower and looked at his heartbroken disciple. In her left hand was a half-written scroll that she had been writing down Gaara's words on, and in her right hand was a writing brush that hung limp at her side. To almost all his face would seem placid, unreadable, and devoid of the emotions he was feeling, but she could see frustration and confusion in his eyes. He lowered his hand from his face. Yes. There is no one I respect more than Naruto Uzumaki. There is no one that I wish to be more like than Naruto Uzumaki. There is no one I owe more to than Naruto Uzumaki. Gaara told her quietly. Then why are you doing this? She shook her head sadly as she asked. Gaara turned back toward the horizon and the shadowy silhouette of the 9-tailed fox in the distance. What more can I do? Naruto has already chosen the ninjas he will be taking into battle. I was not among them. All I can do is evacuate the Sand Village and give him a place to fight the Kyuubi, which I have done. The only thing left is for me to record his greatest battle, he said with a hint of hurtfulness in his voice. Matsuri looked down in sad thought and then said, Master, you sound a little bitter? Yes, Matsuri, if I had to put a word to how I feel right now, it would be bitter. Naruto, a Jinchuriki, the last of his kind in me, a former Jinchuriki, I thought of all people he would take me into battle with him for this fight that he would want me there the most. He could easily ask all the ninja nations for help with his trial and have armies flocking to his aid, yet he does not. He refuses to ask for any help. I understand his reasons to a degree. The average Chunnin would easily fall in this kind of fight. Only an extraordinary ninja would be of help. I am the strongest ninja in the land of wind. I am the Kazekage, yet I am not extraordinary enough for him to take me with him. For him to let me help him in his time of need. To give back something to the man who has given me so much. Is it because I'm the Kazekage that he didn't ask me to go? You could easily take over as Kazekage, I wonder why. Gaara said as he looked up to the twinkling star in the night sky. Master, I know why he didn't ask you to go. She said honestly and tenderly. Gaara turned back to her with glimmering eyes and a lost expression before asking. How can you know his reasons when even I don't know them? If you know, then please tell me why I am forced to sit here helplessly while my greatest friend battles the hardest fight of his life. Tell me why I must endure the hardest thing I've ever had to do, to sit here and do nothing not just because he asked me to. Matsuri smiled at him beautifully as the tears fell down her face. She was overcome with Naruto's true reason and said, Master, don't you know the reason? How could you have forgotten when it was the both of you that taught me the reason? Don't you remember? Flashback. The fighting arena was a complete mess after Matsuri and Naruto battled at the Chunnin exams. Boo, but you said you'd kill Gaara if I didn't rescue him from you. She said in confusion as her hands and lips trembled. Naruto nodded his head as he replied. I said I'd kill Gaara of the Red Sands. I don't know a Gaara of the Red Sands. I once met a man called Sasori of the Red Sands, but as far as I know that is not a title your master carries. Matsuri laughed a laugh of relief. She laughed for a long moment before saying, I knew it. In the heat of battle I couldn't trust it, but I knew that wasn't Gaara. She told him through her tiredness. Naruto gave her a curious look as he walked over to her. How? My clones are perfect. He asked her intently. She nodded her head slightly. Yes, your clone was perfect. Right down to which leg and hand is his dominate, even how he moves and talks, all perfect. She said with a smile even though her ripped-up hands and broken ribs were causing her to tremble in pain. He eyed her intently and asked, Then what made you suspect it was a clone? The smile faded from her face and she wore a longing look of wonder. It's the way you look at him. I've never seen two people look at each other the way you two do. What do you see when you look at Gaara? She asked in a lost manner. He gave her a slight smile and kindly said, Forfeit the match and I'll tell you. She gave him a short sarcastic laugh through her pain before saying, I can hardly hold myself upright. There is no way I could fight you anymore even if I wanted to. She looked over at the proctor hiding in the doorway of the fighter's prep room and said, I forfeit. I am not his equal in combat, knowledge, or jutsu. She collapsed onto her back as her will to hold her trembling body upright faded. Naruto held the blue kunai to his chest and closed his eyes in concentration. He disappeared for no more time than an eye blink and was standing with Gaara by her side. He took his arm out from around Gaara's shoulder and leaned down next to her. He looked sincerely over at Gaara. That's it, that is the look I am talking about. I've never understood it. It's like you two are looking at each other's savior. Please tell me what you see that I cannot? She asked honestly and longingly for the answer. Naruto reached down and gently held her hands. He poured his healing chakra into her grass-stained, earth-soiled, and ripped-up hands. As he healed her he said sincerely, I see hope when I look at Gaara. Hope? She questioned him. He continued to heal her hands and closed his eyes and nodded at her. Yes, I see hope when I look at him. What do you mean though? Why do you see hope that would cause you to look at him in such a way? She asked in confusion. Naruto finished healing her hands and her trembling stopped. He placed her hands in the center of his stomach on his black undershirt and said, You know what I am, right? And you know what Gaara used to be? You are one of the few blessed with this knowledge? He asked her clearly, not sure if she knew. She nodded her head a few times. He told her, Do you know what happens to us when we are released from that burden that we carry? She teared up at the mere thought of it and nodded her head again. Now you see. Gaara is the only one of our kind that was ever released from it. And lived. But Naruto cut her off and kindly said, It was Elder Chio making amends for her past deeds. I only provided the chakra for her so she could use the jutsu. She was the hero that day, not me. He answered her unasked question as two medical ninjas set a stretcher next to her. Master Gaara? She asked. Gaara held up his hand to stop the medics from taking her away. What do you see when you look at Naruto? She asked so sincerely yet still longingly and curiously for the answer. Gaara took a long deep breath. I am not as gifted with words as he is, but I will tell you as best as I can. I, too, see hope when I look at him. Master, please explain this as he did. She begged him with a curious look on her face. As you asked, he said with a slight bow of his head to her. I used to be the perfect shinobi. I was a mindless killing machine that the leaders could use to kill anyone they saw fit to send me after. I never failed or got hurt during my missions. I felt that true power only came from relying on oneself. I defined my existence by beating or killing other shinobi. It was only after we fought that I learned true power comes from protecting those precious to you. He said. She asked. How did he change your mind, Gaara? What did he do to turn you away from being a mindless killer into someone that protects others? After a long moment of silence he said. He did the same thing to me that he did to you today. Naruto has a way of teaching the ones he fights as he fights them. He has a way of changing people. The day that we fought, I had yet to find my equal in combat. I had only been touched a few times in my life and no one had ever come close to defeating me. I toyed with him at first, but his eyes changed and it was then that he fought me earnestly. He was protecting his team members and I was relying only on myself. He fought me with a strength and determination I had never seen before. No matter how many times I knocked him down, he kept getting back up to fight me again. Even after all our chakra was spent and we could hardly move, he still crawled toward me to attack me again. I tried to kill him, but he was only trying to defeat me. I then asked him what makes him so strong and he told me. True strength only comes from protecting those precious to you. That day he defeated me and I changed. I no longer wished to be a mindless killer. I wanted to protect people the way he did. I wanted to see people the way he did. I wanted to become truly strong. Strong like the ninja I admired most. Like Naruto Uzumaki. And a flashback. Master, how could you have forgotten when it was you and Naruto that taught me the answer that day at the Chunnin exams? It's in the way you look at each other, it's hope. He sees hope in your eyes. He sees the hope of your people that are depending on you. He sees the hope he gave you that day he defeated you and changed you just like he did to me. He sees you as a brother he never had. A brother with the rarest ability to share that hope with others, making them understand each other's pain and suffering. Don't you see, Master? You are just too valuable for him to risk. She said emphatically to him. Realization came to his eyes and he smiled slightly. I see, how could I have forgotten his reason? You are right, Matsuri, you are right. He said as he looked down and shook his head, slightly ashamed of himself. He sighed and then turned back to gaze out over the desert. The desert looked like the rolling waves of the salty ocean that had been frozen in time. The moonlight cast a pale bluish light over the landscape and made the sand dunes glow. The wind blew grains of sand in large clusters across the pale glowing dunes like schools of fish swimming through the sea. The clusters that had been caught up in the wind skirted across the dunes, creating a rippling pattern going down the mountains of sand. Gaara gazed out upon his homeland in awe and wonder. Matsuri started when he finally spoke again. I was always a little jealous of the leaf ninjas. They live in marvelous lush green forests. They often get to see the rain while we so rarely see it. They have trees that skirt the clouds themselves. Trees that can bear enough food from a single one of them to feed an entire village for days. While we must scrimp and save every resource just to survive another season in this harsh desert. I always thought they were blessed while we were cursed. The desert always reminded me of my own heart, barren and devoid of anything. But in this moment I feel very different about the desert. This is the first time I've come to see my homeland as more beautiful than any forest or any other place I've ever seen. Still. Gaara looked from sandy desert dunes to the giant canine form hunched over looking at a fading emerald light on the horizon. Matsuri had a smile playing at her lips as she walked over and stood beside Gaara gazing out over the desert night. I'd give it all up to be a few steps closer to him right now. I'd gladly die to help him. I'd give nearly anything to be standing next to the greatest man in the world as his equal. He said as turned to Matsuri with a smile that was both bittersweet and kind. Matsuri looked out over the desert dunes with the same look of awe and wonder that Gaara had. I guess that makes me a pretty bad Kazekage. Saying I'd gladly die and leave my people all for the sake of a man that isn't even from the land of wind. Gaara said. Matsuri slowly shook her head while watching the emerald light that was miles away and said, No Gaara, that is what makes you the greatest of all the Kazekages. She smiled at him as she looked over at him and honestly asked. You said nearly anything. Does that mean there is something you wouldn't give up to be by his side right now? Gaara nodded his head and said, Yes, there is something that I wouldn't part with even to be by his side right now. Well, what is it, master? She asked him curiously. Gaara cast his smile across the landscape and said, You knew Naruto's reason when I had forgotten it and you don't even know the answer to this? Foolish disciple, the answer is you. Matsuri's face went blank with shock as she held her limp hand in front of her mouth. Ma master, did you just mean? She stuttered as her cheeks turned pink before he spoke again. The gleaming emerald light has faded and darkness reigns across the pale moon-lit desert once more. The giant nine-tailed fox still looks to the place where the light had once been unmoving. Small white flashes appear every few seconds in the place where the emerald light had once been. Matsuri turned her blushing cheeks back toward her scroll and started nervously writing down her master's words once more. Something weird has gotten into Gaara, his even talking in that poetic way Naruto does. Still, I wonder what he truly meant. She thought while writing. The giant nine-tailed fox's expression could only be conceived as great sadness. Its massive furry tails were flared out behind it like a fan lying on the desert sands. Sakura's sobbing wails carried far out into the desert night as Sasuke was lost trying to comfort her and quell his own sadness that he was choking on. Little did they know that the saddest among them was not even a human, but a fox. Sakura and Sasuke had no words to convey their sadness, but the eternal nine-tailed fox did. She turned her massive head to sky and called out to the moon. Araru! Araru! She called out again and again. Her great cries of sadness carried even as far as the sand village miles and miles away where Gaara and Matsuri heard them. Aero! Her massive howl conveyed an eternity of sadness in a single sound that even words couldn't capture, yet it echoed into the night for what seemed like forever. Sasuke lost himself to the massive sound he couldn't ever fully comprehend. Your howling is beautiful and yet sadder than I could have ever been. I've never heard a sound like that. It's flowing through my body, making me understand her great sadness. Sasuke thought as he was frozen in place from the sound. It's like she's pouring a lifetime of sadness into her howl and calling it out to the moon. Is this really the Kyuubi demon? How could a demon cry like that? Sasuke thought as Kyuubi's howl touched him. Since he gave his eyes to Naruto, his tear ducts had remained dry. Not a single tear did he shed even for himself after the war. The nine-tailed fox emitted an infinity of sadness and despair to the moon as Sasuke's empty eye sockets shed tears that soaked his bandages. Sakura's sobbing wails only became stronger as she clutched his body and cried. She cried and cried as Kyuubi howled into the night. Sakura. Sasuke said hollowly. We should. Sakura's eyes flew wide open with a trembling start. Didn't I hear what I just thought I heard? Please let me hear it again. Let me hear that beautiful sound again. Kami, please don't be playing some cruel joke on me. She thought desperately, hoping against hope that she didn't imagine it. She moved her body down from his neck to his chest as she gripped his side tightly with hope and desperation shining in her puffy swollen eyes. Tad humped, she clutched him tighter. Please, just please let me keep hearing that sound. She thought with desperation and hope that grew even more. Ta-thump, ta-thump. She shut her eyes tightly and gritted her teeth as her entire body tensed up. Please, please don't let me be hearing things to give me false hope. Asterisk ta-thump ta-thump dot ta-thump 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 star. Sakura was frozen in disbelief as his heartbeat set into a steady rhythm. She couldn't even move, she was so stunned. Her body rose when his muscled chest took in breath and fell when he released it. A smile of radiant joy appeared on her tear-stricken face as she looked over to Sasuke. He's alive. He's alive. She yelled to him with sheer joy in her face as her voice echoed across the desert. She had long since given up all her tears, yet tears fell from her cheeks in two tiny rivers of red. Sakura's tears of blood fell onto his white overcoat as she gave up trying to choke them back. Naruto, thank you. Thank you so much. She embraced him with all her might. Impossible. He's alive. Sasuke thought soullessly. Sakura took in several sharp breaths to calm herself, even though her crimson tears never ceased to fall on Naruto's chest. She pushed herself upright while straddling his waist. His chest rose and fell again, that only brought an even more joyous smile to her face. She placed one hand over the other over his heart and closed her eyes with a smile as she quietly said, "Thank you." Sakura struggled to combine her life force with her chakra and started forcing it into him. "I'll give you everything I have, Naruto. I will give you my memories of who I am and who I have always been. I will show you that I always liked you best, even when I couldn't admit it to myself, even when I was infatuated with Sasuke. I see now I was actually in love with you." She thought as she streamed what little chakra and life force she had into him. Within a few moments the color started returning to his face. The orb of chakra Sakura was holding over him gradually grew smaller and smaller as she closed her eyes in concentration. "I know it's like a few drops of chakra when you are a raging river, but I want you to have them, even it only increases your chances by a fraction of a percent." She thought as she saw sparkling stars in her vision. She knew the stars were the start of her nervous system shutting down as the cells in her brain died. Yet she did not tremble or strain. She was happy beyond words to give her life to him. "I guess it is time for goodbye, Naruto. We had a lot of great adventures together, but you'll have to continue them without me. The only thing I have left to tell you is I love you, fare well." She thought, and she focused the last of her chakra into him and waited for death to take her. She watched her memories as she gave them to Naruto. She waited and waited until her eyes snapped open when a memory that was not hers was shown to her. She saw Naruto's Rasengan clashing into a Chidori that it seemed she was holding in front of her with a waterfall behind her at the Valley of the End. She suddenly became aware of a hand on her back over her heart. "Sasuke, what are you doing?" she said in shock. He smiled and said, "You didn't think I was going to let you die, did you?" He continued to use the raw chakra transfer on her. Sakura struggled slightly and said, "Sasuke, you can't. You have to save your chakra. What about the fight? Naruto would be very sad indeed if I let you die." "How would he fight if he was filled with despair?" he said as he forced his life force through her. "But what about the side effects of that jutsu? How do you even know it?" She yelled in a panic as she tried to shake Sasuke's hand off of her back. Sasuke smiled sincerely to himself and said, "Fear not, Sakura. I don't plan on force-feeding you my chakra until you fall in love with me again. Nor could I don't have Naruto's nearly endless supply of chakra." Naruto stirred and broke their argument as they gaped at him. He moaned and turned his head. "Ruby, are you all right?" he said in his delusional stupor without ever opening his eyes. Sakura's eyes went wide as she broke the jutsu and thought, "Ruby, I thought he would say Hanabi's name or maybe even mine, but Kyuubi's name?" Sakura thought in stunned shock. Ruby.2 thought I heard you howling, are you in pain? He said caringly in his troubled sleep. Naruto, just what kind of relationship do you have with the nine-tailed fox? Sasuke thought soullessly as he looked from Naruto to the giant towering fox. Sasuke, what are you doing? she said in shock. He smiled and said, "You didn't think I was going to let you die, did you?" He continued to use the raw chakra transfer on her. Sakura struggled slightly and said, "Sasuke, you can't. You have to save your chakra. What about the fight? Naruto would be very sad indeed if I let you die. How would he fight if he was filled with despair?" He said as he forced his life force through her. "But what about the side effects of that jutsu? How do you even know it?" She yelled in a panic as she tried to shake Sasuke's hand off of her back. Sasuke smiled sincerely to himself and said, "Fear not, Sakura. I don't plan on force-feeding you my chakra until you fall in love with me again. Nor could I don't have Naruto's nearly endless supply of chakra." Naruto stirred and broke their argument as they gaped at him. He moaned and turned his head. "Ruby, are you alright?" he said in his delusional stupor without ever opening his eyes. Sakura's eyes went wide as she broke the jutsu and thought, "Ruby, I thought he would say Hanabi's name or maybe even mine, but Kyuubi's name?" Sakura thought in stunned shock. Ruby.2 thought I heard you howling, are you in pain? He said caringly in his troubled sleep. Naruto, just what kind of relationship do you have with the nine-tailed fox? Sasuke thought soullessly as he looked from Naruto to the giant towering fox. Chapter 35, To Be Eternal. The winds swept the desert dunes under the twinkling stars of the night as Kyuubi slowly turned her giant head down from the moon to look at Naruto. Her echoing howls of sadness still rang out in the distance. Naruto sat up and grabbed his throbbing head with both hands. "My head is killing me," he said as Sasuke continued to gape at the nine-tailed fox in stunned wonder. Sakura's blood-teared eyes quivered like she couldn't believe what she was seeing as she said, "Oh, how do you feel, Naruto? Are you really okay?" Naruto's tense expression faded as hands slowly moved toward the single trigram left of the Jinchuriki seal that his father put on him the day he was born. He traced its dark outline on his stomach gently with his fingertips. His eyes became lost, shocked and confused as to what had happened to him. I feel lonely," he said in a lost voice as he closed his eyes and shook his head while trying to understand all the things he was feeling. "Lonely?" Sasuke asked in confused surprise as he tilted his head at him. Sasuke's expression went blank. "He's lonely? Of all the things I thought he'd say, mainly I'm hungry, but he says that he's lonely?" Naruto wrapped his arms around his stomach and curled into a ball. "I feel like a piece of my soul is gone, like I'm not whole anymore. It's such a strange feeling, this feeling of being all alone. It's unlike anything I've ever felt before," he said as confusion and a hint of fear shined in his eyes. Sakura looked at him blankly, not knowing what to say. Naruto held himself for a long moment as a gust of wind blew over him. It's like I'm not me anymore, it's kind of a scary feeling," he said in timid fear as he looked at the ground in front of him. Realization came to Sasuke's face. "He's lonely. I see. He can no longer feel Kyuubi's presence inside of him. So now he feels like he's all alone. They have always been together and now they are two separate beings. That is why he said that he felt like a piece of his soul was missing. That's what that look in his eyes means," Sasuke thought as he looked at Kyuubi's eyes. It's the same look that is in Kyuubi's eyes, though not as pronounced. They don't miss each other. They miss being one, Sasuke thought as he looked into the soft emerald eyes of the nine-tailed fox. Sakura stuttered as she tried to comfort Naruto. While Sasuke placed his hand on Naruto's shoulder and gave him an understanding smile. Naruto turned his lost deep brown eyes to Sasuke. Sasuke reached out his hand and covered his eyes for a moment and hinged his eyes to blue before pulling back his hand. Those eyes look much better when they're blue, he thought honestly. You aren't alone, Naruto. You haven't lost anything, he said as he slowly raised his arm and pointed at Kyuubi. What you are looking for is there, he said emphatically. His quivering lost eyes started to fill with glimmering hope and he turned his head. marveled at Ruby as he looked her up and down in awe for a long moment. He shifted his weight as he planted both his hands on the ground. His muscles tensed as he rose to his feet. Sasuke rose with him. He swooned and Sakura went to catch him, but Naruto caught his balance first. Her eyes were full of concern for him and she could only watch him blankly. Well, what is he going to do? Is he about to go all out on the fox right now? Should I ready my weapons? Should I prepare my jutsu? What should I do? She thought in an unmoving and nervous stare. Naruto turned his lost eyes filled with wonder back toward Ruby and started staggering forward. The nine-tailed fox tilted her head curiously at him as she watched his exhausted body moving closer to her. Naruto was dragging his feet and his shoulders were slumped as his breath quickened, but he continued onward. What are you doing, Naruto? She could attack at any time. Sasuke thought blankly in horror. Naruto leaned forward as he neared her left paw. He quickly stumbled the last few steps and fell onto the pace between her clawed toes. Sakura turned to Sasuke with a perplexed look and quietly asked, "What is he doing?" Sasuke only returned her confused expression before turning back to Naruto and Kyuubi. Naruto's breaths came in labored gasps, but the lost look of wonder and longing never ceased in his eyes. He grabbed the top of one of her toes and strained to pull himself up. His arms extended straightened to lift his body up and he then turned around to sit on her giant toe before standing up slowly. He swooned slightly and fell to his knees at the base of her ankle. He took in several breaths trying to clear the haze out of his head. He then looked up at Ruby's shin that towered before him and raised his arms out wide over his head. Kyuubi tilted her head even farther to the side and her look of curiosity only deepened. Naruto fell forward and embraced her furry shin. Her leg was so big that his arms didn't even reach a third of the way around it. Naruto turned his head and rested the side of his face on her leg and he closed his eyes as a sense of peace came over his face. That look on his face. He looked so peaceful and serene, like a child clinging onto the warm embrace of its mother. The whole time since he's woken up it was like he couldn't breathe. It was like he lost his breath and yet it's like he just found it. He found it by embracing Kyuubi. Sakura thought blankly. He rubbed his face into her fur. Yeah, this feels a bit better, this feels right so soft. He said as his body relaxed into her fur and he started to drift off to sleep. Hey Sakura-chan, I'm hungry. He mumbled as his body went limp against the fox's leg. The moments slowly went by and no one moved. They all stared at Naruto's peaceful sleeping face in the pale moonlight as they tried to take in one of the most unbelievable and unpredictable things he had ever done. His breath came in a slow rhythmic beat as his head was nearly covered in her soft long fur when the wind blew. Kyuubi raised her head and looked back at the moon. The moon's reflection shined in her emerald forest green eyes. You are certainly the sappiest and strangest mortal I have ever met, Naruto, but you make quelling my rage much easier. You may rest and regain your strength there if you like, I do not mind as much as I thought I would. Rest well, Naruto, for you still have your promise to me to keep. If only all the mortals of this world were like you, then I'd have nothing to fear. Ruby said softly and honestly. Is this how Naruto sees Kyuubi? Two had no idea she could even be like this. She doesn't seem like a hateful rampaging monster at all, she looks, dare I even think it, beautiful. She thought blankly. Sakura came out of her daze and slowly a smile appeared on her face. She reached into her pack and softly said to herself, I'm so glad I remembered to bring it. She pulled out her camera and carefully lined up a shot of Naruto sleeping. The flash went off and a click sounded as she captured the moment. She went to put her camera away, but took another look back at Kyuubi sitting still in the moonlight while gazing up at the moon. I don't think she would mind. She whispered to herself as she took a picture of the nine-tailed fox looking at the moon. Lord Hyuga sat next to a hospital bed that Hanabi was sleeping in. It was nearing twilight and only the glow of the moon shined through the window. Hayashi stared at his sleeping daughter's face in silence for so long that even when day turned to night he didn't even turn on the light. A gentle knock on the door sounded and then Tsunade carefully entered the room. She looked slightly haggard and tired as she walked up beside him. "Hayashi," she said softly. He was lost in his own thought and did not respond to her. She placed her hand on his shoulder and he started slightly. "Hayashi, why are you sitting in the dark?" she asked softly. He took in a deep breath as he closed his eyes and shook his head at the floor. He opened his eyes and put on a respectable face. "I am only worried for her," he said slightly shakily. "The drugs I am using to keep her sedated will not harm her, Hayashi, or do you disagree with my reasonings?" she asked. He hollowly shook his head and said, "No, I quite agree with your reasoning. Keeping her sedated is what is best for now. If she were to wake up, she would go after Naruto and there would be nearly nothing we could do to stop her. Should Naruto perish in battle, it may lessen the shock of his chakra network being torn from her to a degree that she might survive." She looked at him emphatically and said, "Then why do you wear such a long face?" Hayashi shook his head again and sadly said, "I am only feeling that I have been a very poor excuse for a father. All the mistakes I have made seem to surface at once when I watch her sleeping here. If I could just go back in time and do a few things differently, I might have made their lives so much better. If I could just go back and let them be little girls a bit more often, then I might have had a happier family. Now all I can do is sit here helplessly and worry and doubt if our Hokage will be coming back." Tsunade gave him a weak smile while fighting to keep herself together. "He is not our Hokage until he returns, Hayashi, and you shouldn't be speaking of that outside the council chambers," Hayashi sadly said. "Of course he is our Hokage. I only managed to stall the proceedings until he gets back and opens the scroll. Every one of the council members knows full well what is written in it. I greatly dislike playing the bad politician during the proceedings, but I had no other choice. Now all I can do is pray for his success when I feel like I have went against him, even though it was for his own welfare." Tsunade flipped on the lights and picked up Hanabi's medical charts from the side table. Hayashi winced his eyes until they adjusted to the light. "Her vital signs are all looking good. She is resting comfortably," Tsunade said professionally. "Tsunade, have you ever looked back at something you have done and thought to yourself, what was I thinking?" he asked her while remembering. Tsunade gave him an exasperated look and said, "Hayashi, this isn't like you. Both your daughters grew up to be fine shinobis. Hanabi even achieved the rank of sage before her 16th birthday. I wasn't referring to that. I was just remembering a time shortly after I agreed to let Naruto use one of my training grounds to practices. I remember sitting at my desk when an enormous sound rattled my office. I went outside and I saw a smoking crater where a small mountain used to be. I remember walking out to the training ground and not being the least bit surprised. I lectured Naruto at length for what he had done. Looking back on it, I feel very stupid. He leveled a mountain, a useless pile of rocks, to me, and I berated him for it. If it would have been any other ninja, I would have been left in awe and fear. Yet since it was Naruto, that I always expect the unexpected from, I went to lecture him," he said, and shook his head in disbelief of his actions. "When I look back on it, I see myself as someone that had a suicide wish. I can't believe I did that on so many levels. I would never walk up to someone else with such power with harsh words without fear for my life. It was right before my eyes again and again, and yet I failed to see it until it was thrust before my face when I could look away. Naruto, the son of the 4th Hokage, is clearly the strongest ninja in the Land of Fire and more than worthy of being our Hokage. The only person I can berate is myself for not seeing it sooner," he said, clearly ashamed of himself as he hung his head. Tsunade let him sit in silence for a long moment before he finally found his voice again. "Is there any news on Naruto?" he asked without ever lifting his head. "Just a few more reports from frightened travelers that saw him heading to the Sand Village. They are being treated for shock in the psychiatric ward down on floor 2 after seeing Naruto while his Jinchuriki seal was breaking. In the last few hours, refugees from the Sand Village has started to come in. They brought word that Kazekage Gaara evacuated the whole village. Most of them went to smaller villages in the Land of Wind, but some of the higher-ranking ninjas and council members were sent here. We can only expect more of them to come tomorrow. I've placed Choji in charge of housing them since Shikamaru already has his hands full with leading the Umbu," she said. "Does Konohamaru know anything about what is going on?" he asked, more out of obligation than curiosity. Tsunade sighed deeply and said, "No, thankfully. He thinks Naruto is just away on a mission and that Hanabi is sick in the hospital. Kakashi has been keeping him occupied for now, but he is starting to get suspicious." "Why not sedate him like you did with Hanabi?" he asked. Tsunade shook her head and sighed in exasperation. "That is easier said than done. He already has the second highest immunity to drugs in the village. The only one that has more tolerance than him is Naruto. No drug I use will put him out for long. Then there is the problem of administering the drug to him. He is dim-witted, but not that dim-witted. We would have to force him to take the sedative, and he isn't the pint-sized Chunnin he used to be. He is a full-fledged sage now with the mentality of a 10-year-old at times. He isn't known for holding back because Naruto is his master, so he never had to. Open conflict with him is too high a risk. Kakashi told me he most likely could beat him into submission, but he might be spending extended time in the hospital afterwards. The whole idea was deemed too risky. Should the worst happen, we will need everyone at their best. Losing Naruto would be a huge political blow to our nation. It is because of him that many of the smaller nations we have wronged in the past have decided to let go of their differences with us," she said while looking at the wall from beside him. After a long moment, Hayashi said, shrug of his shoulders. "What good will he be if he hears that his master passed away? He will be distraught and useless. Please don't forget Naruto has used that forbidden jutsu on him as well. He might need to be put under sedatives for his own protection." Tsunade shook her head and said, "No, that is not necessary. Naruto only used it on him a few times to test out the jutsu. He didn't use it to the extent he did on Hanabi. I've already tested him. I asked him one day to tell me what direction that he thought Naruto was in after I sent him out on a mission. He failed miserably. Hanabi, however, got it right down to the slightly degree. On her first try. She wasn't guessing, she knew what direction he was in. Konohamaru is in little danger, if any, from the jutsu should Naruto pass away." She looked away in pain after saying the words. "That doesn't mean he isn't in any danger. He grows wiser by the minute. Eventually he will find out the truth, and I think it is best for him and everyone else if he is sedated. If the worst should happen, we can tell him at the right time so he doesn't go berserk," Hayashi said as he raised his head to look at his daughter once more. "If you talk about him like he is wild beast," Tsunade said in slight offense. Hayashi looked understandingly at Hanabi's face and said, "Sometimes they do act like wild beast, very powerful wild beast." Hayashi thought for a long moment before straightening himself up and turning towards her. He stood up and confidently said, "Send me. I can bring him back here. I only need one clean blow and he will be out for at least 6 hours. Then you can administer the drugs and keep him under until we know the outcome." Tsunade shook her head at him sadly and said, "He only needs one blow on you as well, and unlike you, he doesn't know his own strength. You would fight to knock him out, but he would strike blows at you like he would strike at Naruto. You have already seen the kinds of blows he is capable of striking when he is serious, or did you forget about his fight with Hanabi at the Chunnin exams?" He smiled proudly at her and said, "The third Hokage taught us that the most valuable people in the village is the next generation Tsunade. Because it is out of them that our next Hokage will come from." Tsunade sighed and said, "Valiant words from a noble Hayashi, but he taught us to protect them from others, not themselves. His teachings specifically state that we cannot fight their battles for them. We are only to keep them safe and let them grow. No, what you are planning to do is just like throwing your life away. Think about how Konohamaru would face Hanabi if that were to happen. That has to be one of the most foolish things I have ever heard." "It is only foolish if you do not believe in me," he stated smartly. Tsunade took in a deep breath of exasperation and then bared down on his shoulder with her might. Hayashi was driven to his knees almost instantly. The floor creaked and moaned under him as Tsunade pressed on his shoulder to just before the point that it would break bones. His teeth clenched and his muscles tensed as his eyes watered in excruciating pain, but his pride would not let him yell out loud. Tsunade sadly yet firmly said, "The best place you can be is right here next to your daughter right now. I will not let you foolishly throw your life away. Now that I have made my point, I must go." A bolt of lightning flashed through the near sheer white curtains of the hospital window just as she heard the sounds of giant wings fluttering. Tsunade eyed the darkness through the curtain in anticipation, hopefulness and dread as she unknowingly released her grip on the Hyuga Lord. Hayashi fell onto all fours panting and coughing from the pain as his head swam. Tsunade continued to gape at the curtain window as she heard the sound of it sliding open to the side. A gentle breeze blew the bottom of the curtains into waves as another flash appeared and then thunder rolled. Heavy sheets of rain sounded from outside from seemingly nowhere as Tsunade swallowed hard as she nervously approached the window. A gust of wind blew the white curtains aside an instant before another bolt of lightning flashed blinding her. She winced, her eyes closed from the blinding light, but she knew what she had seen sitting on the windowsill. The creature was a giant at over 3 feet high. His feathers were of the deepest color black that glistened in the faintest of light. The curtains had cast themselves over his image when her sight returned a moment later. She hastily went over to the window and cast the curtains aside with such force that they were torn from their rod. Another flash of lighting illuminated the village from behind as she looked to the windowsill frantically with worry in her eyes. The noble creature stood at attention looking straight forward. Its bright yellow eyes were keenly intelligent and his powerful hooked beak was a glossy black. Most normal animals are merely tools to a ninja, yet a few are honored with the rank of Chunnin and are considered fully fledged ninjas. Of all of the animals given the honored rank of Chunnin, only one of them ever achieved a higher rank. The bird was so large that he was often mistaken for a large black eagle. His wingspan was over 12 feet wide and all who knew him could tell who he was at a glance. Around his neck, on a worn leather strap, was a shining metal plate with the symbol of the rank of Chunnin. Beside the symbol for Chunnin on the plate was a symbol of a hawk in flight with a message tied to its leg. Razor Wing, the fastest messenger in all the 5 nations, sat still perched on one leg on the windowsill. He held his other leg out and on it was an official scroll tethered to his leg. It took Tsunade a moment to steady her racing heart before slowly reaching down and carefully untying the scroll. The scroll felt heavy in her hand as she looked at the Kazekage seal on it. There was also another symbol by the seal. It was a symbol she knew well, but had only seen a very few times during her reign as Hokage. The symbol was of an open scroll on a desk with a large lavish quill on it. It was the symbol of the High Chronicler that was only put on something that held great historical significance. Only a High Chronicler or a Kage was allowed to use the seal. Her hands trembled for a long moment as she looked at the unopened scroll. Razorwing relaxed his at attention posed and ruffled his feathers and shook the water off his back before he laid his feathers down flat again. Droplets of water hit Tsunade in the face and broke her out of her still stare at the scroll. She closed her eyes and took in a deep breath before she broke the seal on the scroll and started to read. I am the 5th Kazekage Gaara of the Land of Wind. I chronicle this event not as one of the 5 Kages, but only as a friend to the greatest man I have ever met. Naruto reached the Sand Village's Great Passage some time ago. He was weary and tired, but his indomitable will still held firm. I spoke with him, Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno and even the Kyuubi Fox herself briefly. She read feverishly for almost 10 minutes before reaching almost to the end of the scroll. Sakura has long run out of chakra and she is unaware that Sasuke Uchiha had his hand on her back feeding her his own in an effort to save the great sage's life. Sakura is shocked and surprised when she realizes that the chakra she is feeding Naruto is not her own but Sasuke's. She warns him of the dangers of using that kind of jutsu and he reassures her that those types of side effect were not going to happen to her. They used up all her chakra and even some of Sasuke's to heal his body, but he only laid still on the sands. Sasuke tries basic first aid while combining it with his lightning element in an attempt to revive him, but all his efforts failed. Sakura loses hope and cries on Sasuke's shoulder. I never thought it was possible, but their sadness was dwarfed by the Kyuubi demon herself. She howled in sadness to the moon again and again. Her howl carried even as far as the Sand village where I heard them clearly. After her last howl touched my ears and after all of them had cried in their own way for him, Naruto stirred. He sat up and grabbed his head with a pained expression on his face. Tsunade frantically read until she came to the end of the scroll. She turned the scroll over, but there was nothing. She turned it back over quickly and scanned it with a wild look in her eyes. Just under the last sentence in the tiny margin was written in very small letters. I'm sorry, Tsunade. I've run out of room to write. Please feed and water Razor Wing. He senses the great urgency of this matter and wants to return as soon as possible. Tsunade dropped the scroll on the ground in anger and frustration. Damn him! I would have preferred no information than to be left hanging like this, she said angrily as she stomped her foot. Hayashi looked at her in deep curiosity as he slowly rose to his feet and asked, Well, what news is there? Tsunade walked quickly over to the door and opened it. The two Umbu guards outside the door started with fright at the suddenness. I need food and water for a large hawk brought here right away, she said in a commanding voice. One of them bowed and dissipated into smoke as she went back into the room and closed the door. Naruto has survived the extraction process, but Sasuke and Sakura are nearly out of chakra. There is no one left to protect him from Kyuubi while he recovers, she said as she pulled out a summoning scroll and started going over it quickly. Have they already started fighting? Hayashi asked, intent on getting some answers. I don't know, she said in annoyance as she continued going through her summoning scroll. Well, has the Kyuubi made any attempts to attack him? Hayashi asked even more intently. I don't know. Tsunade snapped at him while searching the scroll in her hands. But surely you must have some answers? He begged her. I told you I don't know. She turned and yelled at him. The scroll ends with him waking up. There is nothing else written, she told him harshly as she found what she was looking for. Summoning Jutsu, she yelled and slammed her hand onto a symbol on the scroll. There was a puff of smoke and then an old suit of light battle armor from the Third Great Ninja War was laying on the floor. She started hastily putting the armor on as Hayashi asked in disbelief. Are you planning to go after him? She tightened the bracer on her left arm and with conviction said, Of course I am. I should have gone with him from the start. I knew I should have followed him. The Hyuga Lord asked her in a calmer tone. You know it is over 3 days away to the Sand village and it is even farther to get to the heart of the desert. Only the most seasoned sand ninjas are capable of going there. This is folly, Lady Tsunade. Who will be Hokage when you leave? Don't you see you must remain here? The village hidden in the leaves needs you now most of all. She finished strapping her greaves on and then turned to him and said sternly. The only question is who will be the Hokage when I get back with him, and Naruto needs me most of all right now. I nearly died once protecting him and I'll do it again. If you try to stand in my way I will go through you. Hayashi sighed as she turned and headed for the door. He closed his eyes and put his hands together to calm his mind. He took in a deep breath and slowly got into hit taijutsu form. Tsunade nearly had her hand on the door when Hayashi lunged at her with incredible speed. He landed a soft strike on her heart from behind while she was in mid-step. Her eyes went wide with shock before slowly closing as she fell over backwards onto Hayashi's outstretched arm. He held his pose for a long moment before he softly said, I told you. I only needed one clean blow. He scooped her into his arms and carried her over to the other hospital bed where he tucked her in. Not a moment later Umbu burst through the door with a blow of water in one hand and a bowl of raw meat in the other. Most of the water he had spilled on himself in his nervous haste. He stopped in his tracks as he had Hayashi laying the Hokage down in the bed. You attacked the Hokage, the Umbu said in blank shock and realization as Hayashi centered her head on the pillow as the other guard entered the room. He kept his back facing the Umbu and said, "Yes. It is every ninja's duty to protect the Hokage. Even from themselves," he said softly and wisely. The guard with the food bowls paused for a moment and then said, "I regret that I have to do this, Lord Hayashi Hyuga, but I have to place you under arrest for attacking the Hokage. You must come with me for questioning. I will not leave my Hokage's side, and most of all I will not leave my daughter's side. If you are prepared to use force on me, then know that I am prepared to do the same and win," he said seriously, and the Umbu guard took a step back in fear as the other in an elephant mask came up behind him. Hayashi's outline glowed with blue chakra, and the Umbu guards knew it was not an idle threat. The smaller of the two Umbu guard nervously said, "Say Section 32 of the Umbu Enforcement Code states that if an infraction is made, the suspected guilty party must be brought in for an investigation." He took a step forward with a bowl in each hand with growing confidence. Hayashi stood up and turned around with a dangerous calm on his face. He took in a slow breath and let it out slowly as he got into his taijutsu form and faced them. Suddenly there was a great gust of wind caused from Razor Wing as he landed in front of the Hyuga Lord with his wings spread wide. His wingspan was so massive that both his wings touched the adjoining walls. The smaller Umbu guard lost himself for the briefest of a moment and dropped the bowls of food and water. The fact that a messenger bird is in the way changes nothing. "I must take you in for questioning even if it is against your will," he said as he nervously drew a short blade from the back of his belt. The smaller Umbu crouched shakily for an attack as the larger Umbu guard placed his hand on the smaller one's shoulder. "No, you cannot attack when Razor Wing is in the way. To attack him is a multinational offense. He is a jonin of all the lands, even rogue ninja never dare to touch him. It would be like declaring war on the other nations," he said seriously. "But Sir, Article 20, he said before the other Umbu spoke over him. "The Lord Shadow greatly dislikes when an Umbu can't think for themselves. The Book of Laws is only a guideline to follow. There will be situation where you will need to use your own judgment to resolve the matter in the right way. This is one of those times, and you have failed. Hayashi only has the Hokage's well-being at heart. He is not a criminal." The smaller of the two Umbu hung his head and placed his fist over his heart. "Sir," he said, and dissipated into smoke. The Umbu with the elephant mask took it off and revealed his old face. "Well played, Hayashi, Lord of the Hyuga clan, then again poorly played, Razor Wing," the High Elder Hamura said before disappearing into smoke with a sly smile on his face. A long moment passed as nothing in the room moved, and then suddenly Hayashi sighed deeply and then sat down in the chair next to his daughter's bed. The giant black hawk cawed and then scampered over to the raw meat that had spilled onto the floor. It gobbled it down in great gulps and licked the water off the ground. "It seems I was right to suspect you. Stop playing the role of a mindless bird and tell me who you serve, Razor Wing, if that is even your real name," Hayashi asked while watching his daughter. The hawk took its time finishing the food off of the floor. It turned its keen yellow eyes back to the Hyuga Lord and spoke. "I am a hawk, so of course I serve the Hawk clan. You know what I meant." "For whom are you here for?" Hayashi asked stiffly. "If that is your question, then I am here for myself," Razor Wing said calmly. Hayashi's face went taut with offense for a moment before relaxing once more. "Who is the hawk sage in the human world?" he asked smartly as he looked over his shoulder at the great hawk. "We don't currently have an active sage right now," Razor Wing stated. Hayashi's eyes narrowed at him slightly before he said, "I am not a fool. I know full well that a member from one of the animal clans wouldn't spend any length of time in the village without looking after their own interest. You have been here for years, so you couldn't have been summoned. You must have traveled from your homeland, which must be a very long ways from here. That only tells me that you are watching over someone. Do you still want to continue dodging my questions? Not a fool, you say?" The giant black hawk stated and threw his head back before crowing in laughter. The Hyuga Lord looked at him in outrage but kept his composure. Razor Wing slowly stopped laughing and looked at him seriously. "The animal clans would disagree with you. Are you not the man that picked a fight with the Toad Elder Fukasaku, an elder nearly 800 years your senior? Even the other clans know his name well, and only the most powerful of them would dare to even ask him for a sparring match, let alone berate him into combat. You are a laughingstock among the clans for your monumental stupidity. I helped you out of a sticky situation, and yet you bombard me with silly questions, and you even get verbally hostile when I refuse you answers. You ask who I am, yet have you ever seen a solid black hawk? My rank and station in the Hawk clan are blatantly told by these black feathers. Did your village forget about the Lord Hawks? Are you planning on attacking me like Toad Elder Fukasaku? You'd certainly have a better chance fighting me over him, as I am only 400 years your senior, but I wouldn't advise it," he said with mirth. Hayashi was outraged, but fought himself to keep himself calm. "I have no plans to attack you, nor have I ever seen a black hawk. I only want to know your reasons for remaining in our village for so long," he said stiffly as he calmed himself. "Does the name Skyreaver mean anything to you?" he asked as he jumped up on the windowsill. Hayashi thought for a moment before answering. "No, I have never heard that name before." Razorwing hung his head slightly sadly and said, "I guess I am not surprised. He died long before your village was founded. He was the former Lord of the Skies, our leader, and my father. Your people do have tales of him. They described him as a rock. Your people's tales of giant rock birds are in fact the ruling line of the Hawk clan. We were once easily recognized by our black feathers, but it seems that is no longer the case with your people. It is a bit sad that your people have forgotten us." He stared down for a long moment before turning his gaze back to Hayashi. "I have precious little time as is, but I was wondering if you could help me," he asked in a noble voice. Hayashi shot him a reserved and confused look. "You of the Hawk clan certainly are strange. You berate me and then ask for my help? Fine, I will help you if I can, but in return you have to give me the true answer as to why you have been here so long, and I want to know your real name." Razorwing nodded his head and said, "Then we are in agreement, as I have run out of time to pick on you, though it was fun for a moment. Rest assured my clan's goals and your village's coincide. My name is Ralacroix. I am the son of the legendary Balikai, the former Lord of the Skies, and I have been the reigning Lord of the Skies for over 300 years. Hayashi gave him a questioning look, and Ralacroix said, "Let me guess, you thought I would be bigger?" The Hyuga Lord scratched his head in thought. "Yes, actually," he said honestly. "Do not let my size fool you. I remind you I am still bigger than Fukasaku, yet I am not his equal in battle. Size is not everything," the large hawk said wisely. "Well put, but what is it that you would need from me?" Hayashi asked intently. "To put it simply, chakra. I only need you to place your hand over my heart from my back and force your chakra into me," he asked. Hayashi's face suddenly became distant, and he cast a sad glance at his daughter's sleeping face. "I am sorry, but I would not use that jutsu even if I knew how. It is the reason my daughter is in the hospital right now. I can only guess how you even know about it," Hayashi said respectfully with sadness in his eyes. Razorwing nodded. "I understand. It would have made my flight easier, but I can manage without it. As for why I am here, I am watching out for a member of my clan." He answered his former question anyway. Hayashi gave him a slightly confused look and said, "I thought you told me your clan didn't have a sage at the moment." Razorwing's eyes smiled at him slyly, and he replied, "Not an active one." He turned back to the open window and fell out of it head first. He spread his great wings and caught the wind as he climbed higher and higher into the air with great speed. With a few moments he was already out of sight, leaving the Hyuga Lord with more questions than answer as he went back to his daughter's side. Naruto was resting peacefully on the massive paw of the nine-tailed fox as she stared at the moon in the night sky. Sasuke stared at Naruto in wonder and said, "To think these two are going to fight each other. Looking at them now, it's hard to believe." He turned to Sakura and said, "He hasn't eaten in days, and we haven't slept in over 4 days. We need to feed him and set up camp." "Yeah. she said with a thoughtful look. Isn't this kind of strange though? When we left the village, did you ever imagine something like this happening? Sasuke gave her a weak, tired smile and said, I gave up a long time ago trying to predict what that knucklehead was going to do next. But I never expected we would be making camp without fear with the nine-tailed fox right in front of us. I'm hungry. Only Naruto would say something like that in this situation. She covered her mouth as she giggled at the memory. I brought his favorite instant ramen. I'll get a fire going and make it, but let's let him sleep until then. Sasuke nodded and said, I'll set up the tents, though it might take me a while as I've used up my sight for the day. Sakura, tired and drained, set up a small fire and cooked ramen for them. Sasuke set up 2 tents by the fire and one by Kyuubi's foot that Naruto was on. Sakura dived out a large bowl of ramen for Naruto, and then she realized a problem. Sasuke walked up to her after setting up tents and felt her deep in thought. What is wrong, Sakura? He asked her. How exactly are we supposed to wake Naruto up and feed him when he is sleeping on Kyuubi like that? She said awkwardly, slightly fearfully, as she looked at Naruto. Sasuke gave her a queer expression in understanding her dilemma. Kyuubi looked over at Sakura and then down to Naruto peacefully sleeping on her foot, then back to Sakura with an understanding look. Sakura seemed a little unnerved as Kyuubi slowly and carefully moved her paw over the 80 feet expanse in between them. She quickly set the bowl down by the fire as Kyuubi's paw with Naruto on it neared her. Kyuubi straightened her paw downward and Naruto that was clinging to her on his knees, and he fell over onto his back and slid down to Sakura. Sakura caught his sleeping form in her outstretched arms in an awkward hug as he slipped off of Kyuubi's soft fur and gently laid him down. By the time she turned around to thank Kyuubi, the fox had already resumed its still stare at the moon in silence. She slightly lamented the fact that she missed her chance, but Naruto's stomach growled loudly caused her to turn her attention elsewhere. She sat down and laid Naruto's head in her lap and fed him in his semi-conscious state at best. After she finished feeding him the first bowl, he snorted in his sleep and mumbled, I'm still hungry. He opened his mouth wide and then started chewing on nothing like he was still being fed. Sakura never moved Naruto's head off her lap as she opened another pack of instant ramen and dumped it into the boiling pot over the fire. Sasuke slowly ate his steaming portion of ramen while sitting on the sand near the fire. Naruto continued to eat nothingness in his sleep as Sakura placed her hands on both sides of his head and looked at him intently. You look completely different without your whisker marks. If I didn't know better, I'd swear I'm sitting here feeding the 4th Hokage. Your resemblance is so uncanny that it's scary, she said as she carefully examined every inch of his face that was illuminated by the dancing fire. Actually, Sakura, you are feeding the 6th Hokage, he said in a matter-of-fact tone. Sakura laughed slightly at his words and said, Maybe someday that will be true. She smiled brightly at him. Sasuke turned his head toward her as he finished his bite of food and then said, No, Sakura, I didn't mean someday. I meant right now. He is very likely the 6th Hokage, the true fire shadow of the leaf, the central pillar of our nation and the strongest ninja in the land of fire. Sakura continued to smile at him, but still gave him a reserved, unbelieving look. Surely you are joking, Sasuke. I know according to the old ways he has passed the test, but they changed it. He can't be our Hokage yet. Tsunade would have to step down for that to happen, she said knowingly. Sasuke shook his head and said, No, Sakura. I'm serious. The morning after we left, the council was taking a vote on whether Naruto or Tsunade was the rightful Hokage. I will not exaggerate to you. The evidence Kakashi put forward to the council before we left was overwhelmingly in Naruto's favor. It would take a miracle if he wasn't voted to be the rightful Hokage. They are probably only waiting for his return before they announce it to the whole nation. You're not joking, are you, Sasuke? She said in stunned shock as the pot of ramen started to boil over. He shook his head and said, No, Sakura, I'm not joking. In your lap rests the head of the 6th Hokage. Kakashi told me everything just before he went to the council room to present the last piece of evidence. And Sakura, it sounds like you are burning the Hokage's ramen. The boiling over pot was sending broth into the fire, making it hiss. Sakura quickly came to her senses and took the pot off the fire before staring at Naruto's face. "Hokage," she said in awe and wonder while holding his chewing sleeping face. "Your dream, it came true. Your face is going to be put on the Hokage monument," she said while smiling brightly as Naruto opened his mouth wide like he was taking another bite in his sleepy stupor. Sakura suddenly gave him a weird, slightly disgusted look and flatly said, "But I hope it's not that face." She laughed after a long moment and smiled excitedly. "I wonder if he knows. I can't wait to tell him," she said brightly, and then her look changed to horror as she remembered Naruto's cyclone after Tsunade told him that he made Jonin an instructor. "On second thought, I don't want to be anywhere near him when he finds out," she said intently, and Sasuke laughed softly at her. "Those were my thoughts as well, but he may already know. He went to see Tsunade just before we left," Sasuke said as Sakura stared at him blankly. Was the sound Naruto made as he opened his mouth and leaned his head slightly forward in his sleep to eat the ramen Sakura was holding just out of his reach. Naruto sniffed in his sleepy stupor and mouthed again, but no ramen did he taste. Sakura suddenly turned and looked at him. She quickly used her chopstick to feed him the ramen she was holding. He chewed in over-exaggerated movements with a silly blissful smile on his face. Sasuke set his empty bowl down and leaned lazily on his knees. Sakura finished feeding him another bowl and he finally laid still in her lap. Sakura turned her eyes from Naruto sleeping to Sasuke and asked softly and intently as she leaned towards him, "You really think he knows?" Sasuke gave her a casual shrug and said, "Who knows? He might." Naruto moaned in his sleep and then shivered in Sakura's lap. He stood up suddenly in his zombified state and opened his blurry eyes as he yawned a long yawn while stretching. His eyes closed to the tiniest of slits and he uttered one sleepy word. "Cold!" Sakura blinked at him blankly and then reached over to her pack and started pulling out a blanket. As she was getting the blanket, Naruto sleep-walked off in the direction of his tent that was by Kyuubi. Sakura retrieved the blanket and turned around only to see Naruto sleepwalking right over his tent. He leveled it and kept walking until he walked right into the soft outer flank of Kyuubi's back left leg. He opened his arms wide like a child and fell forward into her fur and fell sound asleep on his feet. Sakura snorted in an exasperated laugh. "The land of fire is doomed if he is our Hokage," she said as she grabbed her head and shook it in disbelief. "Did he do something stupid again?" Sasuke asked like he already knew the answer. Sakura smacked her lips a few times as she swallowed and flatly said, "You might say that." Sasuke took in a deep breath and mustered what little chakra he could. He turned his head toward the nine-tailed fox and used his sight flash that allowed him to see them like a still picture. He saw two messy drag lines in the sand caused from Naruto's feet that went right through the tent he had set up for him. He saw Naruto's blissful look while sleeping on his feet while embracing the fox's soft hind flank. Sasuke laughed softly, but it wasn't long before he couldn't hold back his mirth and he laughed out hard. It took him a few moments to calm himself to a low soft laugh. "I am sorry, I didn't mean to laugh. I just couldn't help it." He looked like a happy little flea next to her. "I just couldn't contain myself," he said to Sakura. Sakura gave the sleeping Naruto a curious look and asked Sasuke, "Why is he doing that and why isn't the nine-tailed fox bothered by it? I thought she wanted to kill him. None of this makes any sense." "It makes perfect sense, Sakura. You just have to understand them and what they have been through," he said, and she turned around and shot him a questioning look with a hint of annoyance. "You and Kyuubi are starting to sound alike. It's almost like you are talking down to me," she said in warning voice. Sasuke sighed and tilted his head upward in thought for a moment. He fell back onto his hands and crossed his legs. "No, we aren't talking down to you. We are trying to explain to you and you always resort to anger when someone tells you something and you don't understand it." A vein budged slightly in her forehead as she gritted her teeth at him and said, "That's what I'm talking about. You are talking down to me right now." Sasuke slowly shook his head and said, "Predictable, no Sakura, that is what I'm talking about. You didn't understand me and you immediately got angry." Sakura's look quickly changed to blushing embarrassment when she realized he was undeniably right. "The first thing you need to realize is that you are selfish and you only see the world through your eyes," he said before Sakura angrily cut him off. "Hey!" she said in angry offense. "I'm a medic. A full-fledged doctor. I give my chakra to others to heal them. How can that possibly make me a selfish person? If I only see the world through my own eyes, then it is the same for you," she nearly yelled. "Predictable. No wonder you don't understand them. Or did you forget that I am blind because I gave my eyes to Naruto?" he said and then turned away from her. Sakura cringed and looked timidly away as she realized Sasuke was right yet again. I'm sorry, I never realized it, but you were right. It's like a reflex, sometimes I just can't stop myself," she said while blushing at the ground in embarrassment. Sasuke sighed and then said, "I never said you weren't kind, Sakura. I just stated the fact that you are selfish in the way you see at the world. You refuse to see the world through any eyes but your own, and that is why you are selfish. This is why you didn't understand why Naruto and I fought when we were younger. When we were younger you thought we were trying to kill each other. This is because you didn't understand us. You looked only through your eyes. So you're telling me to look through someone else's eyes?" Sakura said and then laughed, and her laugh became more and more uncomfortable as Sasuke says silent. "Even though you are making a joke of it, yes, that is exactly what I am telling you," he said seriously. "But what do you mean, Sasuke? How can I see those someone else's eyes?" she asked him desperately. "Sakura, I am very tired already, but I will try to teach you," he said, and then he plunged his hand into the sand. He raised his hand and the grains drained away from his palm until only a small round pebble was left. "Tell me, Sakura, what does this rock feel?" he asked her. I don't know," she said in a reserved manner. He plunged his other hand into the sand and lifted only sand up that slowly drained out of his palm. "And what does this sand feel, Sakura?" he asked her. "I don't know," she said in confusion. "If you can't understand the rock and the sand, then how can you possibly understand Naruto and the eternal nine-tailed fox?" he said honestly. She gave him a perplexed look and asked, "What does the rock and the sand have to do with Naruto and Kyuubi?" "Sakura, do you know what the word sage means?" he asked her. She gave him an odd look and said, "Sage means sage, doesn't it?" Sasuke shook his head and said, "Sage means wise one, Sakura. As for what the rock and the sand have to do with those two, well, it has everything and nothing to do with them." Sakura gave him a flat look of annoyance and said, "How is that an answer?" Sasuke laughed softly and said, "Whether it be a toad or a slug sage, all sages start at the same point. The rock. The rock is the simplest of all things, and that is why you start there. Even a simple rock is difficult to understand at first, as it is so different from us. Yet once you understand the rock, you can understand the sand, and then the water, and then even life as a whole, given enough time." Sakura sighed and said, "That still makes no sense, Sasuke. The rock and the sand are the same thing. The sand is only very tiny rocks." Sasuke tilted his head at her as he raised the rock and the sand he had in his hands up to his face and said, "Are they? Are they really?" He blew across his hands. The rock laid still in his hand while the sand blew into the air and caught the wind, only to be carried away in the chilled night's breeze. "Was I supposed to get something from that?" she asked him in an unbelieving tone. Sasuke smiled as he stood up and said, "I guess when you are ready you will understand." She shot him an annoyed look as he turned and walked back over to his tent. Sakura's turned back to Naruto's sleeping face and her face softened. "Hey Sasuke, how do you know so much about this? I mean, you're not sage, so how could you know? Are you so sure about that, Sakura?" he said as he turned his head over his shoulder towards her. Sakura thought carefully for a moment and then her eyes went slightly wide. Every time I came to his house he told me to come in before I even touched the door or said anything. That's the same ability as Naruto? Is it really the same? I thought they were totally different somehow. She thought as Sasuke smiled to himself and turned back around. Sakura looked down slightly sadly and said, "Wait, what kind of sage are you, Sasuke?" He turned back around and faced her. "Now do you see that you are only seeing the world through your own eyes? You just now realize that I'm a sage and you don't even know what kind," he said sharply as she looked down in shame. Sasuke sighed deeply and said, "I'm a former snake sage. I captured Orochimaru's soul and my own, and it gave me the affinity of the snake as well as his training. I understood what it was like to be a patient snake. What it felt like to use my surroundings to hide myself and wait for the time to strike. I felt what it was like to know and understand every bush and fallen leaf on the forest floor, for I would need them to survive. If I was harmed, I would shed my skin and grow a new one. I felt what it was like to store my energy up for hours at a time and strike at my prey with blinding speed. This is the way of the snake sage. Once Itachi purged my master's soul from me, I lost the ability of a snake sage. It was then that I started figuring out what affinity I had and not my master's. The animal I was suited for didn't slither on the forest floor, but soared through the clouds. My chakra animal is the hawk. We don't know the forest floor to the degree of the snake, yet in a few hours we can cover more distance than the snake could in days. We don't need to hide ourselves and wait because none of the other animals can reach us in the air. The hawk knows every breeze and air current like it was a family member. We have the keenest of all eyesight. When we are hungry, we simply spot our prey from the air and snatch it before it even realizes it has been caught in our talons. Our greatest joy and sanctuary is to fly through the air where we are safe and at peace. Our greatest blessing is to look down on the earth from the air and see it in a way no other can understand. This is the way of the hawk. I am blind, yet I am still a hawk sage. You, however, I think already knows, do not befit the title of a slug sage. I have no idea what the slug sage elders were thinking when they bestowed this title on you." Sakura covered her shamed face with her hand and said, "There was a lesson that they tried to teach me, but Tsunade gave up on it after I failed so many times. She said our time could be better spent elsewhere. In the lesson I was supposed to meditate in a swamp-filled bog on the bank. I tried again and again, but I just couldn't still my mind with all noise from the insects and frogs. Whenever one would land on me, I'd scream and it would break my concentration. Tsunade got frustrated with me and made me meditate in the bog with only my head above the water. It only made it harder because not only did bugs and frogs land on my head, but things in the water crawled all over me. I can't even begin to tell you how bad that place smelled, yet I think I missed a very important lesson now. As for what Elder Katsuyu was thinking, I'm not so sure she bestowed the title on me anymore. I asked her what it would take for me to become a slug sage just before I came back to the village. She told me that if mastering jutsu and our fighting style is what a sage is to you, then a sage you are. I see now that I should have asked her a very different question. Do you see me as a sage? It's such a subtle difference in the words, yet it completely changes its meaning. Sakura felt like a fool as she looked down in shame at herself. Sasuke nodded his head and smiled weakly at her. Would you like me to explain the lessons? Sakura looked up with quivering hopeful eyes and said, "Tu thought I was supposed to figure out the lessons for myself?" Sasuke nodded quietly to her and said, "Ideally yes, but I owe the Slug clan no allegiance. I will tell you the meaning of their lessons and where you misunderstood them. Meditation does not simply mean to still your mind, Sakura. It means to become at peace and at one with everything around you. Whether it is a swampy bog or a dojo hall, you still need harmony and peace to become one with everything. To truly understand everything around you. Tsunade had you mediate on the bank, and when you failed she tried to immerse further into the swamp. She was trying to teach you that it wasn't about stilling your mind, it wasn't about you at all. It was about harmony and peace of mind no matter where you are. When you mediate by yourself, you learn only about yourself. When you mediate out in a swamp, you learn about the swamp until you understand it, but only if you understand yourself first. Sakura shook her ashamed eyes at the ground and said, I understand that now, but I even told Hanabi that I was a sage all because I misunderstood the elder. Did you? Did you really misunderstand the elder's lesson, Sakura? He asked her honestly as she turned her trembling eyes toward him. I shall tell you the lesson behind that answer as well, Sakura. He asked, and her questioning eyes answered him for her. He looked down and sighed before returning his head upright. I thought you of all people who has spent so much time with Naruto would at least understand that lesson, Sakura. When you asked what would it take for you to become a slug sage, she responded by saying, if mastering jutsu and our fighting style is what a sage is to you, then a sage you are. You do not understand these words, yet you know Naruto so well? His entire life is a testament to this lesson. If you do not believe in yourself, how can you expect others to believe in you? The answer to that lesson is that if you are a sage in your heart, then you are a sage. Just because I don't see you as a true sage doesn't mean you aren't one as long as you believe you are a sage. Look at Naruto. You only now see him as a Hokage, yet he has always seen himself as a Hokage. Even when everyone else hated him, he saw himself as their greatest protector. It didn't matter if the person was a beggar or the third Hokage. If you disrespected him, he would yell and get in your face no matter your rank or station. If you treated him with kindness, he would lay down his life for you, just like a Hokage. One by one he won over the villagers that hated him until now even Tsunade, a Hokage herself, feels she is beneath him. It is only now, after so much unshakable faith in himself, do we come to understand that he was right. It is the same for you. If in your heart you are a sage, then that is what you are, even if I don't see it myself. You only need to make others understand what you feel inside. That is the lesson, Sakura. It is not for others to tell you whether or not you are a sage. That is for you to decide and then prove to others that it is true. Sasuke said and then nodded. Do think I understand some of what you have said, she said shakily. Sasuke nodded again and then turned around as he walked towards his tent. Sasuke! Please, one more question, she yelled desperately. Sasuke stopped, yet did not turn around as he curiously said, and what would that be? Sakura swallowed hard before finding her voice and asked, what makes a person a great sage? Sasuke asked carefully. What did Elder Katsuyu tell you? She told me that only 1 out of every 1,000 ninjas could attain the rank of sage. She told me out of those sages only 1 out of those 1,000 would likely achieve the title of great sage, but she never told me what a great sage is. Please, if you know, tell me, Sakura asked in a lost voice as she looked away. Sasuke shook his head at the ground and sighed. How I wish I knew. How I wish I knew that answer. I've asked myself the same question countless times. Even though I understand the rock, the tree, and even the bear, I am still a long way away from understanding the great sage Naruto. I'm not even sure the great elders of the clans know the answer to that question. Sasuke nodded to himself a few times and then straightened his shoulder with confidence as he raised his head up to the sky. Maybe a great sage cannot be described, only seen. Look at Naruto sleeping. He is sleeping on the most feared being in the world, yet he sleeps soundly. Of all the Hokages, only the first has captured her and contained her. Yet even among them it was Naruto alone that sought to truly understand her. Naruto sleeps on her without a care in the world. None of the Hokages that have come before him could ever hope to achieve that. All others fear her, yet Naruto, I sense, misses her. When all others thought she was a raging demon, it was only he that tried to understand her. She is said to change landscapes with the swipe of her paw, yet she does not. Naruto has befriended her somehow and she restrains herself. She stands still with the only person capable of hurting her in the world resting on her backside. She only wants him to recover to full strength so she can fight him. I see them, yet I cannot even believe my sight. I think they see each other as the other half of their souls. I have this feeling that that is how they see each other, yet I know it's impossible, but still I believe, he said honestly. I see, Sakura said as she nodded her head to him. I see. So that is what a great sage is, someone that can understand anyone's pain, regardless of who or what they are. So this is the man I know as Naruto Uzumaki, our Hokage. Friend. And a great sage? I already told you that even I do not understand the great sage to the degree I would like to. He is already well beyond my understanding. I have no further answers for you, Sakura. If you want to know more, you will have to search for the answers yourself. Good night, Sakura, he said with a polite nod as he climbed into his tent. Sakura stared at his tent with even more questions raging in her mind than when she first spoke to him. After a long moment, she walked over to her tent and went inside. Her mind would not let her sleep, and she tossed and turned for over an hour before she decided to go outside again. She opened the flap of her tent and stuck her head out into the night. Only dying embers were left in the fire pit, and the nine-tailed fox still sat staring at the moon. She stared at the unreadable face of Kyubi for a long moment. The reflection of the moon glistened off of her eyes. Sakura crawled outside and grabbed her elbows as she looked down in indecision. I can't sleep. There are just too many things rolling around in my head to sleep, and I'm worried about tomorrow. I want to talk to someone. Anyone, but the only one awake is Kyubi. I was hoping maybe Sasuke or Naruto might be up, but no. She shook her head at the ground sadly. There is no one for me to talk to. No one can help me sort all this out. How can they sleep so soundly when they know what is going to take place tomorrow? She thought distantly as she envied them. Sakura returned her look to the magnificent nine-tailed fox as she sat in silence like she was waiting to live. Sakura shook her head again and then slowly took in a deep breath. She breathed out while summoning her courage and took a step forward. She as walked timidly towards Kyubi, she saw that Naruto was no longer sleeping at her flank. Sakura wondered where he was as she looked around for him, and before she knew it, she was standing right next to Kyubi's massive right front paw. She started as she came to realize where she was. She covered her racing heart and slowly calmed herself down. She closed her eyes as she wore it in her head. Thighs is foolish. How could I ever think of talking to the Kyubi demon? She plans to kill Naruto. But maybe she's not a demon. Maybe she would listen to me. Then again, I might offend her, and then she will rip me to pieces. She thought nervously and fearfully. I mean, how could I even start a conversation with a being like her? I am so silly for even thinking about something like this. I should just try to go back to sleep. Still, I wonder where Naruto is. She thought amongst the rest of her jumbled thought. She turned away to go back to her tent, but found her feet rooted in place. The question refused to let her go. She fought with herself for a long moment before turning back around to face the moon. Where is Naruto? She whispered under her breath like she wanted Kyubi to hear her, and yet she was too afraid and didn't want her to hear her at the same time. Sakura waited timidly and nervously as the silence reigned between them. Slowly her face relaxed into sadness as she forced herself to smile in spite of the way she felt. She turned around again to head to her tent again. He is sleeping, Kyubi said softly as to not wake him. Sakura jumped with a start as she nervously looked around. Didn't know you heard me, she said in a very rushed and nervous voice. I only wondered where he was. I mean, he wasn't sleeping where he was an hour ago. Don't think you ate him or anything. Mean I didn't assume you did or anything. I just didn't see him, so I just wanted to make sure he was all right. She babbled quickly with her hands out in front of her defensively. You didn't see him because he is arrogant even in his sleep. He climbed all the way on top of my head and collapsed in his sleep. He is sprawled out like a child on my forehead, she said quietly. Sakura's eyes suddenly went wide with shock. Flashback. Gamabunta was loading Naruto, Hanabi, Konohamaru, and Sakura onto himself to make haste from the Leaf Village to the border of the Land of Fire. Naruto, you and Hanabi will be fine riding on my head. Konohamaru with his monkey sage training should be able to keep a hold of my robes if I give him a break every now and then. But for you, Sakura, well, let's just say travel for you ain't gonna be as pleasant, he told her. Sakura gave him a blank look of slight fear and said, What do you? Gamabunta's long tongue lashed out and snapped her into his mouth in the blink of an eye. Her muffled screams of anger could be heard as Naruto and Hanabi jumped up on his head. Quit squirming! Otherwise, I might swallow you, he said sternly through his clenched jaw. It's not my fault slug sages aren't known for their agility or stamina. I told you it wasn't going to be the preferred way of travel, he said. Naruto! When I get out of Gamabunta's mouth, I'm gonna beat you and him senseless. They heard her muffled voice yell. Naruto's expression became slightly strained as he said to himself. Oh Kami, she is pissed. Pipe down, little lady. Gamabunta yelled at her. Konohamaru quickly leaped onto his back and grabbed onto the collar of his robe. Konohamaru looked up to where Naruto and Hanabi were sitting on the head and yelled up to them. Hey Naruto. How come I can't ride on his head too? It looks like it would be much easier than holding on down here. Gamabunta turned his head to the left so one of his eyes was looking right at Konohamaru. You ungrateful little monkey, you're lucky I'm giving you a ride already. I still have my pride as a member of the Toad clan. Only a Toad sage can ride on my head, and even then only if I like him. He yelled at him. And a flashback. I never thought you'd ever allow him onto your head, for any reason. Most, if not all, of the chakra animals consider that to be a sacred place for a ninja to ride on. I would know. I was forced to ride in a toad's mouth for over 100 kilometers because of that very reason. Gamabunta told me only a toad sage could ride on his head, and even then only if he liked them enough. She said wide-eyed in disbelief. That accursed Uchiha is right about you. If you don't understand the rock, then you can't understand what it means to ride on any chakra animal's head, least of all mine, Kyubi said while never taking her eyes off the glowing moon. Sakura looked down shyly and nervously as she wrung her hands. I'm sorry. I thought that since you were trapped inside Naruto for so long, Fat Hat, you might want someone to talk to. Kyubi let out a breath that sounded almost like an unconvinced soft laugh. Your intentions are as clear as water to me. Did you forget you are talking to an eternal being that has seen the birth of color itself? It is not my heart that wavers, it is yours, Kyubi said without any doubt in her voice. Sakura's mood only lowered into an even more shy state as she asked with a hint of hopefulness. So you don't want to talk? Kyubi never stopped staring at the moon and said, Look at who I have to talk to. A Uchiha that is barely 1,000 years old and a mortal that isn't even close to being 100 that has stated her disdain for me. Why would I wish to speak to those that can't even comprehend me, let alone understand me? Kyubi looked down and shook her head before returning her gaze to the moon. The only one that I could speak with is Naruto. And we're already long past words. Even if we spoke, we would already know each other's words before they were spoken, she said almost sadly. Sakura nervously looked up to the nine-tailed fox and said, I'm not sure if you are aware of this, but Sasuke is only 23 years old. You are a fool if you believe that mortal. The passing of time is a perception in and of itself. Every time he used the Sharingan, he aged far beyond what you base time on. Mortal eyes only work for so long, this is why he went blind. His body is maybe only 23 years old, but his eyes were hundreds of years old. You are basing time on the change of the seasons. This is not how time works at all. Time moves differently for each person. Have you not seen Naruto train with over 1,000 clones for an entire day, day after day? You watched his power grow beyond any other mortal, yet you think he is so young? Do you even know how old he truly is? The nine-tailed fox questioned her. She said nervously. Before you asked me, I would have said he also is 23, but since you put it that way, he is 26,837 years, 7 months and 14 days old, and even he doesn't understand me most of the time. How could you understand me when you are only 23 years old and you can't even understand the rock? Wouldn't you choose to remain silent then, to speak your words on deaf ears? Kyubi asked her. Sakura staggered at her words in shock. Naruto. He is over 26,000 years old? She thought soullessly and nearly collapsed to her knees. It took her many long moments before she looked from the ground back to Kyubi with trembling emotional eyes. My ears may be deaf, but at least I am trying to hear you. She yelled to her with all her might. I am not hard of hearing, mortal. You have no need to shout at me so be it. Ask all the questions you would like, but I cannot promise you that I will answer any of them. Kyubi said quietly. Sakura suddenly felt very self-aware of where she was. Her eyes darted all over the place in the thoughts of her outburst and of what Kyubi had told her. How can you be so sure how old Naruto is? She finally asked cautiously while she wrung her hands. What else could I do when I was trapped inside him but mark the passing of time? It's not unlike what mortals do. The great fox said. Oh, she said before finding the courage to timidly ask. You said that you saw the birth of color itself. What did you mean? Sakura asked curiously. You will almost certainly not understand that answer, but I will tell you anyway. This world wasn't always like what you know it to be. Long, long ago the world was nothing but clear water and jagged rocks. No land rose above the surface of the endless ocean. Slowly over countless years the waters turned from clear to blue and the rocks turned into sand. Eons of time later small creatures you couldn't even see with your eyes sprang into life. Millions of them clustered together and for the first time I saw the color light green. From that color eventually fish came from and I saw their silver scales. Fish took over the barren endless ocean and the sands and rocks pushed themselves free from the ocean waves. I saw it as brown. Life from the ocean came upon the land slowly. Not long later life again came to the land. Small bushes pushed their way free from the rocks and soon the land was covered in vibrant green plant life. On the land I saw many colors, white, brown, green and true blackness in the night sky. Then the water fell from the sky in a downpour. After it was over and the sun shined again I saw all the colors that took an eternity to form in the world all at once. Your kind calls it a rainbow, she said like she was lost in her thoughts. Sakura blinked a few times trying to take in Kyubi's words. I think you might have been right. When you said I wouldn't understand, did you mean to tell me you saw the world being born? She asked in disbelief. Shaped is the more correct word, but to you I would think being born might hold the meaning better. Are these really the question you came out to ask me though? She said. Sakura looked down sadly and said, I guess not. She shyly yet curiously asked, Do you hate Naruto? Kyubi stayed silent for a long moment before saying, Yes, I hate him, yet I respect him and I like him all at the same time. How to put it so your tiny human mind could understand? I hate all humans, but I hate him the least. Sakura blinked blankly at her response in shock. Then why are you trying to kill him? She asked intensely. You are short-sighted even for a human little girl. If all I wanted was his death then I simply would have killed you and the Uchiha before we ever reached the desert. I even asked you to heal him and you heard my howl, yet you still have a negative way of looking at the situation. You seem to think that every time two beings clash in combat that it is pointless. That they are just two foolish people that are angry and bloodthirsty fighting only for the sake of seeing which one of them is stronger. You see, yet you are blind to the truth. She said without emotion. But why are you two going to fight to the death then? It makes no sense to me when you both look like you are so attached to one another. Sakura begged her for an answer. We aren't fighting to the death, mortal. Naruto will most likely die tomorrow when I pour all my rage into him. We will fight and death will most likely occur, but we aren't fighting to the death. We are both laying our lives on the line and fighting for something that we are willing to die for. She stated without a flicker of doubt in her eyes. Sakura looked down and clenched her fists as she shook her troubled head. But that is the same thing. What could you both be fighting for that is worth laying down your life? She asked sadly and angrily. Are your eyes shut that tightly, mortal? Are you not one of Naruto's closest companions, yet you ask me what he is fighting for? You are blind then, human girl. At least I have the words to make you understand this. He fights for humanity as a whole whether they see him as a friend or a foe. he will still fight for them, be it with words or weapons. You most of all should know that he is fighting to bring peace to all the nations and the world if he can. Unlike those stuffy politicians that say words like this, he actually means them and is working towards his goals selflessly. He asks for no reward or payment for his work, he does it just because he wants to," she said, and fell silent once more. Sakura looked down, slightly ashamed of herself for asking Kyubi for an answer that she had once known but had forgotten in the moment. She turned her confused, lost eyes back to the nine-tailed fox looking at the moon and sadly asked, "Yes, that is Naruto's reason. How could I have forgotten it? You still haven't told me your reason though. If Naruto is fighting for peace for humanity, then are you fighting to throw it into chaos and destroy it?" There was a long moment before she spoke again. "In some ways that is true. In a way the reason we must fight is because he is the protector of humanity and I would see it destroyed, but that is not the main reason," she said while gazing at the moon. Sakura looked up at Kyubi and begged her, "Then what is the main reason? Why must you try to kill him?" "I am bound by my agreement with him from telling you that answer directly. So I will tell you this. The hatred that I carry is not entirely my own," she admitted softly. Sakura timidly trembled as she winced, her eyes closed and looked away. "But can't you just walk away? Can't you just choose not to fight? We cannot walk away from each other now, not after I have placed my faith in him. I will not let him go," she said. She turned her eyes back to Kyubi and said, "If you have faith in him, then why are you doing this?" "Two still don't understand." "Of course you don't. You do not understand what it means to have everlasting life. That is why you didn't understand my story about the birth of color," she said with slight exasperation. "Then make me understand. Everlasting life sounds like a blessing beyond all other blessings to me," she said desperately. The nine-tailed fox looked away from her and said, "Everlasting life is a curse I would not wish on anyone mortal. I cannot die. Even Naruto cannot kill me, no matter how powerful he becomes. He may scatter my soul, but I would reform in a few years or so, maybe even as long as a century, even if I didn't wish it. I have tried to kill myself countless times when the pain of time becomes too great on my soul, yet even I can't accomplish that feat," she said honestly as she returned her gaze to the moon and sighed ever so slightly. Sakura suddenly blinked at her in blank shock before asking, "You've tried to kill yourself before?" Kyubi nodded her head ever so slightly and replied, "Of course I have. All Eternals have at some point in their existence. I guess I'm getting a little too attached to mortals lately," she said and closed her eyes in thought for a moment as Sakura watched her curiously. "So be it, I will try to make you understand my eternal existence like I did for Naruto. I want you to know that besides Naruto you are the only other human I have tried to tell this to. So listen well, mortal, for even he didn't understand most of it," she said and then opened her eyes. "You call being eternal a blessing, yet it is a curse. I will try to explain it in a way that you might understand. You are a medic now. Let us say that you have everlasting life and you dedicate your being to learning to heal and treat the sick. You are happy for the first few hundred years. But eventually the smiling faces of those that you have helped no longer pull at your heartstrings the way they used to. As time goes on, you rarely see something you haven't already treated until you have treated nearly every kind of wound or poison there is. The years slip by and seeing something new only once or twice a decade has left you feeling hollow and without purpose. So one day, as you are walking to your job in misery, you come across an old man fishing by a bridge. Beside the old wrinkled fisherman is a large pile of fish. You ask the man how he was able to catch so many fish in a river that has so few fish in it. He tells you about how he senses the fish and how certain fish like certain baits. He tells you how certain lines and poles are best suited for different kinds of fishing. Your medical herbs wilt in the sun as you question the wise old fisherman for hours. It is only when he says that he has to go home that you realize you talked with him for almost a day. You learn more in a single afternoon than you have in almost 50 years as a medic. Life has become vibrant and new to you again. You find you are smiling without have to fake it for the first time in a long time. As you walk to work the next day, you greet the old fisherman with a pile of fish next to him with a smile. You return to your office and hand in your medic's coat to your disciple and then leave, never to return again. You leave your comfortable, well-paying job to live as a humble fisherman. Over the next few years, you learn a wealth of knowledge from your new teacher, who is all too happy to share it with you. You move into his rickety old shack that is nearing the point of falling down. In the small, cramped shack lives 5 people. His son and his son's wife with their 2 children all live in the tiny room. They all work hard, but it is the master fisherman brings home the food for them. Most of all, they are happy. Even though they are dirt poor, they are willing to happily share what they have with you. You continue to live out your life learning from the master fisherman and hearing his wild tales of when he was younger. One day, though, he passes away, so you take up his place, feeding the family you now call your own. They too grow old and die off, and eventually their offspring no longer wish to be fishermen, and you have no one else to teach. So you remember your master's words and pack up your pole. You head for new waters to catch new types of fish, leaving the strange people you once considered family behind. You go upstream and cross the landscape only to find a huge lake where to sit down and cast your line into the water. A fish takes the bait and pulls harder than any fish that was in the small river you used to fish in. You struggle and fight it for near an hour until you pull the biggest fish you have ever seen onto the shore. The rush of the fight still makes you pant for air, but you are happy. For the first time in a while, you feel joy looking at a new kind of fish that you have never caught before. You fish the lake for a time and even teach many of the nearby villagers how to fish as well. You start feeling that life has become dim again when all the fish in the lake are too easily caught. You already know what baits they like best and when they are hungriest. So you pick up and head to the ocean. There you fish at its bank and catch new fish, yet you run out of new fish to catch again. You decide to go out to sea and catch even more types of fish. You brave hurricanes and tsunamis and catch even more fish until you have caught every kind of fish there is in the world. From the smallest minnow to the largest whale, you have caught them all. Fishing has lost its purpose to you, so you return to the small bridge where your master that died used to fish so long ago. You fish and you can believe how small the fish you catch are, yet you are happily lost in your own memories from when you fished with your old master. But then the bitter sweetness sets in and you realize he is gone forever. You decide to finish out the day and move on, never to return again, when an annoying hacking sound scares away the fish. The hacking sound starts to drive you mad, and eventually you throw your withered pole down and charge toward the direction of the noise. You find a small group of men chopping down trees. You snatch the axe from a youth in annoyance that has been hacking away at a large tree for nearly an hour and fell it with a single stroke, leaving the logger stunned. The head logger offers you a job and compliments your strength. Yet you refuse him and tell him that if you are so good at it that you could easily do it for yourself. You sit back down to fish on the bank and you remember the satisfaction of how it felt when the tree fell before your might. You leave your pole on the bank of the river and take up logging, and again life becomes vibrant and new. The logger that offered you a job becomes your rival, and over a few years you manage to grow your logging operation larger than even his. So large that in fact you run him out of business. He and his workers come to you cold and hungry as your operation thrives. You not only give him a job, but make him your first logger that controls the entire crew when you are away. A few more years passed and you and your former rival invent new and safer ways to cut trees until you can improve on it no more. There is almost no tree you haven't logged or cut. It is then you receive the strangest order you have ever gotten, and your curiosity is piqued. You receive a very detailed order for Malyoan white ash wood, also known as junk wood, not even fit to cut down to get out of the way by nearly all loggers. Scratching your head, you remember one you had avoided that was large enough to fill the order that was nearby. You take a good wagon and a few sturdy men and retrieve the tree. You take the vile-smelling tree into town to a small humble shop built into another shop. You knock on the door to receive, you pay, and most importantly find out what this odd person wants with wood that others consider worthless. The thin, skinny shopkeeper that looked almost sickly answers the door and asks that tree be brought to the back of his shop, as he handed you a great sum of money for the tree. It was more than 10 times what even a hardwood tree was worth. His frail body only backed away as he coughed a few times and headed to the back door. You follow him and watch your men unload the heavy tree and hand off the payment to your first logger. When they ask you, let them know that you will not be coming back for the night. The shopkeeper is tireless in his work and set to work shaving down the tree as you watched. He stripped away the bark and most of the wood in what a seasoned logger would call as blatantly wasteful to the point of offense. After he was done, the tree that weighed many tons was reduced to a single thin 20-pound plank that he takes into his workshop. From there he carved out many curved pieces, yet only 7 of them met his standards, and the rest he chucked into the fire to keep himself warm. He dips the pieces into a clear sap and hangs them up to dry, and then he falls asleep in his shop too tired to walk to bed. You stay in the workshop waiting for the man to wake, only wanting to see what he is going to make. Late the next afternoon he wakes and he says nothing to you. He doesn't even acknowledge your existence as he sets to work again, carefully assembling the pieces. The process was daunting and complex even though the object was small. It takes him a full week to complete what he is making while you watch. Once he is done, you see what he was making is a violin. It shines and glistens as he sets the instrument to his chin and draws the bow across the strings. The sound it makes is beautiful beyond words as he plays a short, simple song. You are intrigued yet again. You return to your first logger and tell him you want 3 giants of the same kind of tree delivered to the man's shop. He questions you about it, but you only tell him that you will reward him well. A few days later he brings you not 3 giants but 5. You stun him when you tell him that the logging operation is now his. You tell him you will not be returning to them, and you take up study under the sickly man to learn his craft. You become quick friends with both the instrument maker and his brother next door that makes furniture. You train for years before you can make instruments of the same quality as him. Soon afterwards time claims him and he dies. You take over his shop, half of the shop, and work with his brother. One day a noble man hears the sound of you testing a newly made violin. He becomes enchanted by its sound and enters your shop. He asks you if he might play the instrument and you hand it to him. The man is no novice at playing. He plays a very difficult piece of music while he becomes lost in the song. Once he finishes the song he opens his eyes and marvels at the violin. He tells you that the violin is easily the most well-crafted instrument he has ever played on. He offers you an exorbitant amount of money for the violin. You refuse him and only charge him 1/20 of what he offered you. You have no desire for great wealth anymore. Only your craft matters to you. The man is disappointed that you would not take more for the instrument, but accepts your price. He vows that he will pay you what the violin is truly worth in time before leaving with it. 2 weeks pass as you labor in your shop when a carriage with 12 fully armed royal guards show up at your front door. One of the guards knocks on the door loudly and you quickly finish what you are working on and answer the door. The armed guard walks over to the carriage and opens the lavish door. You wait in your tattered work clothes covered in wood dust for someone to come out of it. The guard bows you to and extends his arm toward the carriage. He tells you that you have been summoned to the royal court. You realize that there was no noble in the carriage and that it had come for you alone. You ride for a few days until you come to a very large city crowded with people. The carriage stops in front of a huge castle at night and you are ushered out. Once inside you are offered fine clothes to wear, but you refuse them. In your old tattered rags with messed up hair you are led to a grand hall where rich nobles and princes are dancing to live music. Once you enter the room as someone at the far end of the hall claps twice loudly and the people dancing back away from the middle of the room. The man that was in your shop weeks ago that offered you so much for one of your violins is seated on a lavish throne at the back of the hall. A golden crown rests on his head and he is dressed in the finest of robes. Leaning up next to his throne is the violin in a case that you had sold him. The nobles eye you with disgust from your appearance as the man beckons you forward and you walk up to the man on the throne. When you arrive before him he picks up the case next to him and opens. It slowly takes out the violin you sold him and asks you if you are really the man that made it. You tell him the name of the violin is Ember, named for its red color, and that you did indeed make it. He asks you to play it for the court. You only know a few basic songs and the one the king had played in his shop. You take the red violin and play the difficult piece of music you heard him play only once. You fill the hall with the song's radiantly beauty. Those that looked at you with disgust happily cheer for you with smiles on their faces after you have finished. The king declares that you are the finest instrument maker in all the land to the entire court of nobles. Several of the bards of the court show you some of the instruments you have created before. Most of them have been handed down from others, so they didn't know you were the master craftsman. You even notice one of your defects in the hands of the eldest bard that you threw away years ago. He thanks you and tells you that he was a beggar before finding it in the garbage. You gain not only wealth but fame as you make instruments that only the wealthiest can afford. This again goes on for many years until you grow bored with this profession too and can bear it no longer. You find new professions and master them until you know every profession in the entire city. You move to a different area and only find a few odd things to learn before leaving again. Many years later you have been searching for a new profession to make life vibrant and new once more, and you don't find one. No matter how hard you look, there is no new skill for you to master. You already know them all. Occasionally someone creates something new again in a profession that you have already mastered, and for a few scant moments you live again while learning it. But afterwards you are left empty and feel all alone. You have long since given up on making new companions. Why get attached to them when they will only hurt you when they die? Everyone you speak to, you feel like you have met 100 of them that were exactly the same. With a simple greeting you can tell with acute accuracy what the life they will live will be like down to the smallest detail. There is no one for you to befriend anymore. Life itself has become stale as you have lived all there is to live in the world. You are forced to look at what you looked away from so long ago when you were a master medic. You are forced to look into the cold eyes of eternity, yet this time there is no escape. You must sit there and wait until something new comes along for you to escape its glare for a brief moment, only to feel even more empty when you return to its icy glare once again. This is what it is like to have everlasting life, mortal. An empty existence where purpose becomes rarer and rarer the longer you exist. Kyubi stated while never taking her eyes off the glowing moon. That hat is so sad, I never realized how hard it must be for you. Sakura said emphatically as she clutched her arms around her while sitting on the sand near Kyubi. Fear not, little mortal, for I am not staring into the eyes of eternity right now. I have what I so rarely find in the endless stream of time. I have a purpose. The nine-tailed fox said honestly. Sakura looked down sadly and said, to fight Naruto. Sakura fought with her thoughts in indecision for a long moment before finally asking. You and Naruto used to be one, right? Does that mean you know what is in his heart? Kyubi honestly said. Of all the places in his mind, that is the only one that I dare not look directly into. If you are asking if he has feeling, for you the answer is yes, but I believe that's enough. Sakura said softly. Kyubi turned her head towards her and said, I see you have learned a little bit of what time can do to a being then. Must you really fight? Is there no other way? She asked as she turned away like she already knew the fox's reply. You keep asking the same question, but the answer will not change, mortal. Naruto has promised me something that is worth more than the entire world to me. If it were any other mortal I wouldn't even dare hope to believe them, but since it is him I hold on to a glimmer of hope that he will be able to do it. You keep speaking to me like I want his death so badly, so I will try one final time to make you understand. She said as her eyes slowly drifted down to a flatter area of the desert a few hundred meters away. Tomorrow I will wait for him there. When he comes to me I will fight him with all my being. I will give him every ounce of my hatred, she said before Sakura sadly said to herself. That will kill him. Kyubi stayed silent for a long moment from Sakura's interruption before speaking again. And when it is over I dare to hope he's still standing there smiling at me, even though right now that smile I see in my mind makes it harder to fight my rage. Sakura did a double take at Kyubi in shock before asking in disbelief. Why, you want him to win? Two thought you wanted to destroy everything. Kyubi turned her massive head to Sakura and calmly said. You think I want to destroy everything? Foolish, I only wanted to destroy humanity so they can never again bind me. Naruto is the child of destiny that will one day save the world or destroy it, not me, if you believe the prophecy. If he does die during our fight, then humanity might just have something to thank me for should he be the one that would destroy the world. Kyubi said. Naruto would never try to destroy the world. Sakura said confidently. The prophecy does not say whether the child of destiny means to destroy the world. It only states that he will either save or destroy it. I know the jutsu he plans to use on me, yet neither he nor I knows what it really does. We only know it uses all 5 of the primary elements and 10 sub-elements in addition to the light and dark elements. You have already seen what happens when he combines 3 elements. He utterly destroyed several mountains at once with it. With each element he adds to his Rasengan, its power grows exponentially. One can only imagine what kind of effect would be produced if he succeeded in combining all 17 of them. He very well could destroy the world with it if he lost control of that jutsu, she said calmly. Sakura's eyes went wide with realization as she vividly remembered the destruction of his 3 elements Rasengan. But... She stuttered in shock, trying to convince herself Kyubi was wrong before looking down. You are probably right. Naruto would try to use a jutsu like that if he felt he had to. All he has ever thought about was getting stronger, she admitted as she realized the truth of her words. She took in a long, slow breath as the realization of just how powerful Naruto really was settled over her. A chill shivered up her spine and she trembled in fear, not at the thought of the 9-tailed fox, but at the thought of Naruto wielding so much power. She grabbed her elbows and looked away as she was trying to stop her body from shaking. The wind howled across the sands of the desert as Kyubi turned her head back to the moon and sat in silence once more. Sakura fought to find her voice several times before managing to say, "Aren't you scared?" The 9-tailed fox shook her head ever so slightly and said, "No. You certainly are strange mortal, or did you even just realize that you were concerned for my safety just now?" Sakura looked across the desert hollowly and said, I guess maybe I was worried about you for a moment there. That power of Naruto's is truly something strange. I've been hated for thousands of years, and here, not even in the span of 20 years, there are 2 mortals trying to understand me. One of them would even name me as a friend. I never imagined that I would hear my name and the human word for friend in the same sentence again. I, who has watched color be born into this world through the eons, have never met anyone like you, Naruto," Kyubi said in envy to the moon. Sakura looked at her questioningly and asked, "Why are you telling me all of this? I know I asked and all, but I didn't think you would answer so much. I just mean that I thought you hated humanity, yet you have been answering my questions for so long. I thought that you would at least understand that much. You healed Naruto and gave me back my purpose. Answering your questions was my way of thanking you for that. Maybe I didn't realize it, but perhaps I did want to talk to someone else after being trapped for so long after all," she said quietly. Silence reigned for a long time before Sakura calmed herself down. She wrung her hands in indecision, with a question plaguing her thoughts as she looked down timidly. "What is it, mortal?" Kyubi asked suddenly while never taking her eyes off the moon. Sakura jumped with a start and then nervously looked up to the 9-tailed fox timidly and said, "It's a stupid question, I wouldn't dare ask it. You will never get an answer if you don't ask the question, besides it hasn't stopped you so far. Do not forget that the world may very well end tomorrow and then you might never get your answer. Besides, I am finding that I enjoyed talking to you more than I thought I would," Kyubi stated. Well, you see, Naruto just looked so peaceful sleeping on you. What I mean to say is," she stuttered nervously as she looked down and closed her eyes. Kyubi turned her giant emerald eyes to the nervous, fidgeting ninja with a curious look on her face. "To only want to know if I could touch you," she said timidly, and the tension drained from her body, and then she looked up at the 9-tailed fox's eyes. Kyubi slowly turned her head back to the moon, and the moment dragged on in silence. "I am already quelling an unbelievable amount of rage, mortal. If I were to falter even for a moment, my chakra would come out and turn you to ashes in the blink of an eye. Just like your jutsu, everything has a risk. The question is, are you willing to risk your life merely to touch me for a moment?" Kyubi asked her with a slight hint of curiosity in her voice. Sakura thought for a long time. The world might end tomorrow, but then again I have faith in Naruto that it will not. Yet Naruto's faith in himself has been wavering. I can't believe I'm even thinking about this. It is so foolish to risk my life for something so small. Then again, this may very well be the last time I could risk my life for him. Can I forgive myself if I don't? Sakura looked up and smiled at Kyuubi. Being able to touch the fur of the nine-tailed fox is a once-in-a-lifetime offer, she said as she leaped high into the air and came down on all fours just below the halfway point on her back. Sakura's eyes went slightly wide as she marveled at her fur that she sunk down into in surprise. It's so soft, it's a lot like the bed Hanabi sleeps on, she said quietly to herself in surprise before slowly raising. She half walked and half crawled up Kyuubi's spine with the smile still on her face. She climbed and climbed until she finally reached the fox's head and stepped up upon the summit of the beast. She saw Naruto resting peacefully in the tangles of her soft fur on her massive forehead while laying on his side. His chest rose and fell without a care in the world. Kyuubi's muscles tightened as she clenched her jaw in anger. The giant fox stood up as Sakura kneeled down and took Naruto's sleeping hand in hers with a look of bright joy in her eyes. Kyuubi's many tails fanned out like writhing snakes in the air and she growled through gritted teeth. You are foolish, brash, and reckless mortal. Kyuubi's angry words never fazed her as she pulled Naruto's hand to her chest with both of hers. She only smiled at Naruto's sleeping form with tears of happiness in her eyes. Kyuubi's body shivered as her muscles relaxed and she once more sat down and stared at the moon in stillness. I like that in a mortal, Kyuubi said honestly and softly as Sakura embraced Naruto and closed her eyes on the fox's forehead. Don't get too comfortable with the way I am now mortal. Tomorrow the Keeper of Death himself will tremble before me as I reclaim what is rightfully mine. It is then that I will become that which your people describe me as and fear most. I will become that raging demon that you thought I was at first fully. It will be then that Naruto and I will fight. I will fight him with everything that I am to settle the fate of this world, Kyuubi said as Sakura's blissful smile continued and her breathing came in slow rhythmic sounds as she slept in Naruto's arms on Nine-Tailed Fox's head.
That's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on my other social media accounts. Anime God here, and I'm signing off.